Chapter 272. Go to watch net. As soon as Zhang Tianhe entered the arena, all the cultivators' hearts tightened. Go to watch net. This was because the reputation of the Zhenyi school was too great. Zhang Tianhe was the youngest son of the leader of the Zhenyi school and also the last disciple. Naturally, his kung fu and magic were nothing to scoff at. Is the Xianmen sect more powerful, or is this nameless kid who came out of nowhere more powerful? All the cultivators had the same thought running through their minds. Zhang Tianhe pinched his fingers and slowly stroked the blade of the 7 stars treasured sword in his hand. He quickly calculated the situation on the battlefield. Just now, he had rushed out on his own. But when he came to the field and faced Li Yundong, he suddenly calmed down. Based on the strength that Li Yundong had shown just now, it would be a lie for Zhang Tianhe to say that he was confident of winning. There were only a few aspects to a fight between cultivators. The first was their physical strength. It depended on whose cultivation was deeper, which was also to see whose internal strength was deeper. However, having a deep internal strength was not enough. One had to have Taoist magic, which was the specific way to fight. It depended on who knew more Taoist magic, who knew more Shentong magic, and who could use it more exquisitely. The physical strength that Li Yundong had shown just now was extremely shocking. Not only was his Jinqi vigorous, but it was also extremely condensed. It was obvious that he had put in a lot of hard work in his cultivation, especially when he had controlled the blue bricks on the ground to move back half a meter like dragging a carpet. This was absolutely impossible to do without an extremely powerful and condensed Jinqi. The second was their powerful magical weapon. A good magical weapon was enough to make an ordinary cultivator become a famous master in the world. Zhao Wuji, who held the 9-yin locust wood sword, was the best example. If Li Yundong hadn't coincidentally injected the ghost yin qi into the fan of 7 treasures, his fan of 7 treasures would have been defeated long ago. Once the magical weapon was defeated, more than half of the battle would be lost. Unless one had great Shentong and great ability, there was no way to turn the tables. Although the 7-star sword in Zhang Tianhe's hand was a powerful magical weapon of the Zhenyi school and one of the 5 famous swords in the world, Li Yundong's fan of 7 treasures was not to be trifled with. It was also a top-notch powerful magical weapon in the cultivation world. Back then, the Fox Zen school had relied on it to fight all over the world without encountering any opponents, and it had been in the limelight for a while. However, later on, the Fox Zen school did not produce any powerful male cultivators, so the reputation of the fan of 7 treasures gradually declined. Zhang Tianhe was very knowledgeable, so it was impossible for him not to know the power of the psychic fan of 7 treasures. Especially when he saw the intense and bizarre battle between the psychic fan of 7 treasures and the 9-yin locust tree sword, even Zhang Tianhe, who was from the orthodox Xianmen sect, had his horizons widened. If the psychic fan of 7 treasures and the 7-star sword were to fight, no one could say for sure who would emerge victorious. Thirdly, just looking at whose cultivation was deeper and whose magical treasures were stronger, it was not certain that they would win. In the process of a fight, it also depended on whether the 2 sides were agile, experienced, and strong-willed. Any one of these factors was enough to tilt the outcome of the fight to one side. However, Zhang Tianhe believed that no matter which of these 3 points he looked at, he did not have the confidence to win. Watch net. 7 KOM. It's not a big deal if I lose, but it's a big deal if I humiliate the sect. In this battle, you can only win, not lose. Zhang Tianhe carefully looked at Li Yundong, trying to find some flaws. But when Zhang Tianhe saw Li Yundong standing in the field, his entire body seemed to be full of flaws. It was as if as long as he raised his hand, this guy would fall to the ground. But when Zhang Tianhe thought about the combat talent and amazing reaction that Li Yundong had shown during his 7 consecutive victories, he felt that it was terrifying. Zhang Tianhe slowly mobilized the Jinqi in his body. He secretly gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He had to defeat this rare and powerful enemy in front of him in the shortest time possible. Zhang Tianhe stood 5 meters in front of Li Yundong. He inserted the 7 stars sword into the scabbard on his back, took a deep breath, and crossed his arms, as if he was holding an invisible ball. He slowly raised it, and when he reached the highest point, his body shook violently. This shake was like a black bear shaking off lice. The clothes on Zhang Tianhe's body shook violently and made a crisp sound. Zi Yuan's eyes immediately revealed a strong look of admiration. She whispered, "What a good move, heaven and earth embrace." Ruan Hongling's cultivation was not high enough, so she couldn't see the kung fu in Zhang Tianhe's shake. She asked in confusion, "Sister Zi Yuan, what's so great about that?" Zi Yuan said, "This Zhang Tianhe deserves to be from the Xianmen sect, and he deserves to be the last disciple of Master Zhang. His kung fu is extremely pure. Look at his shake, and his whole body is overflowing with gang qi. Look at his hug just now. It means that he is holding the spiritual qi of heaven and earth for his own use, striving to be one with heaven and man. That shake is even more amazing. It shakes the gang qi all over his body into a soft effect, and the clothes on his body can actually make the sound of tearing through the air. It's amazing, really amazing." Ruan Hongling opened her mouth wide. "Is Li Yundong his opponent?" Zi Yuan's face was solemn. "I don't know. Zhang Tianhe is undoubtedly the top cultivator of the younger generation. He is a strong opponent for Li Yundong. I can't guess who will win and who will lose when the two of them fight." While the two of them were talking in private, the cultivators of the various sects were also whispering to each other, guessing who would win between Li Yundong and Zhang Tianhe. Zhang Tianhe's shake revealed the authentic Xianmen sect's internal energy, and the momentum of his body suddenly rose to a peak. He opened his eyes, which were like lightning, and said loudly, "Jinrenli, I'm sorry." After that, the 7-star sword behind him suddenly jumped out and floated in the air, staring at Li Yundong like a tiger watching its prey. It didn't take the initiative to attack, but just put on a defensive posture. Zhang Tianhe's waist suddenly twisted, and his upper body was extremely low. His body was undulating, and his arms were stretched backward like flowing clouds. Zi Yuan suddenly widened her eyes and sent a private voice transmission to Li Yundong, "This is the wind body cloud hand. Li Yundong, hit him in the middle. Don't let his luck succeed." When Li Yundong heard Zi Yuan's words, he frowned slightly. He wanted to reply, but he didn't know how to send a private voice transmission, so he just glanced at Zi Yuan. Go to C. Color asterisk caret and text learn % super hashtag speed. Update. Zi Yuan seemed to understand what Li Yundong was thinking and shouted anxiously, "This is the 5 Thunders spell." He was summoning lightning. Be careful. As soon as Zi Yuan finished speaking, she heard a loud crack in the sky and the sound of thunder rumbled. Li Yundong was shocked. He suddenly looked up and saw dark clouds rolling in the sky above his head, and thunder and lightning were rolling in them. However, Li Yundong was a person who had gone through divine tribulation, so his fear of this level of heavenly thunder was greatly reduced. In his heart, he even vaguely felt that he didn't have to be afraid of heavenly thunder of this level. He could even control it. As soon as this thought came to his mind, he took a deep breath, and all the jinqi in his body rushed out from the top of his head like a beacon of smoke. It was like a long, straight line, and his qi was like a bull. He also imitated Zhang Tianhe's movements and performed the wind body and cloud hands. When the cultivators of the various sects saw that Li Yundong's movements were exactly the same as Zhang Tianhe's, they suddenly burst into an uproar. The 2 disciples of the Zhengyi school who followed Zhang Tianhe widened their eyes and shouted, "Impossible! How can he also know the wind body and cloud hands?" Hua Tuo had created the 5 animals play by watching birds and beasts, Zhang Sanfeng had comprehended the Tai Chi magic by watching turtles and snakes, and Ji Ji had created Xingyi boxing by watching 2 chickens fighting. Since ancient times, almost all martial arts and Taoism had originated from the natural imitation of animals, and the wind body and cloud hands were the same. Thunder and lightning were the power of heaven, but where did thunder and lightning come from? There was no other reason. If there was wind, there would be clouds, and if there were clouds, there would be thunder and lightning. This move of the wind body and cloud hands was a secret of the Zhenyi school. It relied on the imitation of the wind and clouds, and then mobilized one's Zhenqi to attract heavenly thunder. Zhang Tianhe's wind body and cloud hands was undoubtedly the authentic one. It used a secret posture to attract thunder and lightning. Although Li Yundong's imitation was very similar, in fact, he used his own majestic Zhenqi to attract thunder and lightning. Zi Yuan naturally knew the difference between the two. Her face was suddenly full of shock. She widened her eyes and murmured, "Is he crazy?" Ruan Hongling was also shocked. How can he know the wind body and cloud hands? I've never seen him practice it before. Sister Zi Yuan, did you teach him? She was in an extremely shocked mood, so she blurted out this sentence and even forgot to use the sound transmission. It immediately attracted the female disciple who had come with Zhang Tianhe, Zhou Ping, who suddenly turned her head to look at her. Her eyes flickered, and her expression was one of surprise and doubt. Zi Yuan had not come to her senses at this time. She shook her head and said, "I never taught him this. He was just imitating and confusing Zhang Tianhe." Before Zi Yuan could finish her words, Zhang Tianhe's movement of the wind body and cloud hands suddenly stopped. It was as if the stormy sea had suddenly frozen, and the stormy sky had frozen in an instant. There was a loud crack between heaven and earth, and a bolt of lightning instantly illuminated the clouds. Zhang Tianhe's hands, which were behind his back, suddenly clasped together and pinched his fingers together. He shouted, "5 thunders of the way of heaven, help me destroy evil." As he spoke, there was another loud crack in the sky. The dark clouds in the sky began to spin rapidly, turning into a vortex. In the middle of the vortex, lightning flashed, and the momentum was terrifying. The cultivators of all sects looked up at the heavenly thunder with fear on their faces. Cultivators were most afraid of thunder. When it rained on a cloudy day, those whose cultivation was lower did not dare to practice magic or use powerful magical weapons. They did not even dare to fly high. Among all kinds of cultivators, those who could practice thunder techniques were definitely the top cultivators. Zhang Tianhe's sudden use of the 5 thunders immediately shocked everyone present and made them feel fear. They thought that the power of the heavenly thunder was unstoppable. After Zhang Tianhe let out a loud shout, he suddenly pointed to the sky with both hands and shouted, "Thunder, come." The moment he pointed his finger up, Li Yundong's movements also stopped. The white qi above his head became thicker and thicker, penetrating straight into the rolling dark clouds. He also let out a loud shout and mobilized all the Zhenqi in his body to attract the heavenly thunder in the clouds. Li Yundong had once absorbed the power of heavenly thunder, so when the Zhenqi in his body was sent to the sky filled with thunderclouds, it immediately caused the heavenly thunder to fall. Boom! Crack! 2 consecutive thunderclaps rang out in the sky at the same time. At the same time, 2 bolts of lightning struck down and struck Li Yundong and Zhang Tianhe. At the moment when the heavenly thunder was about to strike, Li Yundong suddenly controlled his Zhenqi to rush toward Zhang Tianhe. At the same time, the Baihui acupoint on the top of his head immediately closed, and all the remaining Zhenqi in his body surged to the top of his head to resist. The fan of 7 treasures also suddenly jumped into the air to block the fierce heavenly thunder. Although Zhang Tianhe's 7 stars sword had also jumped into the air to block the heavenly thunder, he had never expected that the Zhenqi gushing out of Li Yundong's body would also attract the heavenly thunder, causing him to be struck. Therefore, he was not prepared to resist at all. Although the 7 stars sword had blocked most of the power of the heavenly thunder, a small part of it still hit his body. The power of the heavenly thunder was not something that a human body could withstand. Zhang Tianhe was immediately struck and spat out a mouthful of blood. He fell backward. Zhou Ping of the Zhenyi school and another short and fat disciple who had gone down the mountain with them immediately rushed forward in shock. Zhou Ping quickly pointed at the acupoints on Zhang Tianhe's body, and the other kept injecting her Zhenqi into Zhang Tianhe's body. Zhou Ping turned her head and looked at the scene in shock and anger. At this time, she saw that Li Yundong's hair was disheveled, and his clothes were in tatters. The shoes on his feet were also broken, and only his pants were intact. Although his figure looked extremely disheveled, Li Yundong's face was ruddy, and he was full of energy. His gaze was even sharper than before, and he was awe-inspiring, looking down on all the heroes. This shock was no small matter. Almost all the cultivators present sucked in a breath of cold air. The battle in front of them had turned into a battle of heavenly thunder between the two of them. This was too exaggerated, wasn't it? But what was even more exaggerated was that Zhang Tianhe, an inner disciple of the Jingyi school, who was known as the authentic Xianmen sect and the #1 sect in the world, had actually been sent flying by a bolt of lightning by a nameless brat, and this brat was actually unharmed. Could it be that this guy is actually a great cultivator who has passed the thunder tribulation? A cultivator shouted in fear. Being able to pass the 8th stage of the thunder tribulation meant that this person was a well-deserved great master of cultivation. He could be on an equal footing with the strongest great master of any sect in its heyday. To pass this stage, one had to first pass the 7th stage of the Jinshin phase and cultivate the indestructible Jinshin before they could cultivate. But if Li Yundong had cultivated the indestructible Jinshin, then he could kill all the cultivators here with one hand. How could they not be afraid and in awe? Therefore, a cultivator immediately retorted, "Nonsense. If he had cultivated to the indestructible Jinshin phase, would he still need to talk nonsense with us before? He could crush us with one little finger." That's right. For thousands of years, there have been so many cultivators, but how many of them have been able to cultivate to the indestructible Jinshin phase? Those who can cultivate to the Yuanying phase are great masters. The indestructible Jinshin? Forget it, this can only be cultivated with the Diyuan Jin Dan. In today's cultivation world, no one has been able to cultivate to this stage. These people were talking about it, but Li Yundong cupped his hands and said in a clear voice, "I've won another game. May I ask if you can keep your promise and leave?" For a moment, everyone looked at each other. Many of them had the intention to retreat and nodded secretly. Zhang Tianhe of the Jingyi school had been defeated, and he had been defeated in one move. What could they do? Li Yundong saw that these people had the intention to leave, and he was immediately delighted. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Zhou Ping suddenly stand up and say loudly, "No, we still have a master from a sect here who hasn't made a move yet." Li Yundong frowned and said, "Who is it? Who else hasn't made a move yet?" Zhou Ping sneered, pointed behind her, and said loudly, "Zi Yuan of the Linggong sect of the Jingyi school, /OM/ for 5278941954. Chapter 273. Go to watch net. Zhou Ping's words immediately shocked almost everyone present. The cultivators of various sects couldn't help but think, yes, isn't Zi Yuan the strongest master of the younger generation in the cultivation world? Why didn't she make a move? Ruan Hongling saw that Zhou Ping had brought the flames of war to Zi Yuan, and she didn't want Li Yundong and Zi Yuan to fight, so she immediately jumped up and said angrily, "What do you mean by that?" Zhou Ping sneered. "What do I mean? I was going to ask you what you meant by that. Just now, I saw that you were quite concerned about Li Yundong, who was protecting the evildoers of the Fox Zen school. May I ask, Jinren Zi Yuan, as the eldest Shiji of the Linggong sect of the Jingyi school, how should you explain this?" Ruan Hongling said angrily, "Does my sister Zi Yuan still need to explain to you?" Zhou Ping snorted. She cupped one hand in the other before her chest and said to the cultivators of the various sects in a low voice, "Everyone, look. The people of all the major sects have made a move, but the Linggong sect has not. If this isn't favoritism, then what is? If you say that they didn't collude with this guy, I won't believe it." Zi Yuan usually treated any cultivator coldly, and she never smiled at male cultivators. In addition, her cultivation quotient was extremely high. Although she treated people coldly, she was polite and well-mannered, so she had a good reputation in the cultivation world. Watch net. 7 KOM. When Zhou Ping said this, the eyes of the cultivators from all sects immediately fell on Zi Yuan's face. They all looked at her doubtfully. Zi Yuan secretly frowned. She knew that she had been forced into a corner by Zhou Ping, and she had no choice but to fight. Zi Yuan stretched out her hand and stopped Wan Hongling, who was about to say something else. She said lightly, "Since the Pope's fellow disciples have said so, I won't hide it anymore." Wan Hongling opened her mouth to speak, but Zi Yuan glared at her fiercely. She immediately closed her mouth in anger and glared at Zhou Ping fiercely. She walked to the center of the field and cupped her hands to Li Yundong from 10 meters away. She said in a clear voice, "Zhenrenli, it's my honor to fight with you. Please don't show any mercy." Zi Yuan's words were full of subtext. She meant to tell Li Yundong, "If you show mercy at this time, I won't be able to explain myself." But Li Yundong just understood it the other way round. He hadn't expected that Zi Yuan would actually take action in person. In Li Yundong's opinion, Zi Yuan was not only beautiful like a fairy, but also dignified and steady. She could be called a teacher and a friend to him. Zi Yuan had a very high position in Li Yundong's heart, only below Su Chan. He absolutely did not want to fight with her here. Therefore, Li Yundong interpreted Zi Yuan's words as, "Hey, we are friends. In this kind of place, we can just put on a show. You have to be merciful." Thinking of this, Li Yundong cupped one hand in the other before his chest and said, "Well, I was just about to ask Zhenren Zi Yuan for advice." Zi Yuan nodded slightly, and her expression became cold in an instant. She narrowed her eyes slightly, and a sharp divine light shot out from her eyes. Like a sharp arrow, it pierced Li Yundong's eyeballs and made him feel a faint pain. Li Yundong subconsciously blinked his eyelids. Go to CNET. 7 KOM 113 Schwa for net. In an instant, Zi Yuan suddenly burst into action. When Zi Yuan didn't move, she was as quiet as a virgin. She stood there gracefully, and others only felt that she was like a weak willow in the wind, as if a gust of wind could blow her up. But at this time, she suddenly moved. The people on the sidelines only felt that Zi Yuan seemed to have turned into a wave in an instant, fiercely pouncing on Li Yundong like a raging storm. When Li Yundong opened his eyes again, he saw that Zi Yuan's figure had swayed from 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 3. The flowing cloud sleeve in her hand was like a raging wave, surging toward Li Yundong. Li Yundong was stunned for a moment. Without thinking, he immediately took a step back. Zi Yuan's flowing cloud sleeve rushed in front of Li Yundong's face. This attack suddenly missed, but the shock made the muscles on Li Yundong's face flow. Li Yundong was shocked. Is this fairy sister for real? Before he could react, he saw Zi Yuan immediately rush forward and catch up with him again. The flowing cloud sleeve in her hand shook again, and the tip of the sleeve whipped toward Li Yundong like a steel whip. Li Yundong took another step back, and Zi Yuan missed again. This time, it was Zi Yuan's turn to be stunned. She had seen Li Yundong fight before, and he had never taken a step back. Why did he take 2 steps back in a row at this time? Zi Yuan was a little anxious. She gritted her teeth and let out a clear cry like a phoenix. With a shake of her wrist, a purple ribbon suddenly rushed out of her sleeve, like a spirit snake, and went straight toward Li Yundong's face. This move was fast and fierce, like a bolt of lightning. If someone was hit in the face, their brain would immediately burst and they would die. Li Yundong was shocked when he saw the ferocity of this attack. He took another big step back and retreated to the previous long line. At this time, the cultivators on the sidelines felt that something was wrong. Before, Li Yundong had defeated 8 people in a row, including Zhang Tianhe. When had he ever retreated? Although Zi Yuan's attack was fierce, it was not enough to force Li Yundong to take 3 steps back. There was clearly something wrong. Some of the cultivators, who had been skeptical, hissed, "What are they doing? Are they really fighting or not?" Zhou Ping took the opportunity to add insult to injury. She sneered and said, you two have a good understanding of each other. Zi Yuan was suddenly ashamed and annoyed. She glared at Li Yundong fiercely and said in a private voice transmission, "Idiot, why did you give way? Do you want to kill me? Fight me for real." Only then did Li Yundong wake up as if he had just woken up from a dream. He reacted very quickly, cupped his hands, and said seriously, "Just now, Jinren Ziyuan stood up for me and said a few fair words, so I let her make 3 moves in a row. Jinren Ziyuan, pay attention." After that, he took a deep breath, opened his eyes, and glared like a fierce tiger. With a leap, he pounced in front of Ziyuan in the blink of an eye. His fist was like a cannon, causing the air to distort. He no longer held back and attacked Ziyuan with all his might. Go see net. 1-1-3 Shui, 4 net. Ziyuan's spirit was lifted, and she shouted, "Come on." Her body swayed, and in an instant, she turned into an afterimage. Li Yundong shattered Ziyuan's afterimage with a punch, and immediately felt that the afterimage quickly turned into countless purple ribbons that wrapped around his body, as if they wanted to tie his hands and feet. With a thought from Li Yundong, the fan of 7 treasures immediately jumped up. With a clang, all the leaves of the fan opened, and like a flywheel saw, it slashed toward the purple ribbons. However, the purple ribbons were the softest in the world, and the fan of 7 treasures could be said to be the hardest in the world. The fan of 7 treasures could only cut off 2 of them, and the purple ribbons that were binding Li Yundong were wrapped around itself. For a moment, the 2 magic treasures were tangled together. The fan of 7 treasures struggled desperately, and its leaves kept opening and closing like a saw chain. After a while, the purple ribbons were cut off, but the purple ribbons quickly closed and continued to tightly wrap around the fan of 7 treasures like vines wrapping around a tree. Li Yundong and Ziyuan were fighting. He knew that Ziyuan's magic was extremely powerful. If they fought at a distance, he would most likely be no match for her. Therefore, he rushed forward to fight hand-to-hand with Ziyuan, forcing her to be unable to release her magic. However, to Li Yundong's surprise, Ziyuan's kung fu was excellent, and she was proficient in the 8 trigrams palm. Her feet moved as if she was walking on mud, and her movements were as smooth as flowing clouds and flowing water. Her legs crossed like scissors, and there was a strong sense of strength in her speed. Ziyuan's body was like a top, spinning around Li Yundong. Her movements were twisting, spinning, turning, and flipping, like a butterfly flying through flowers. Her hands pierced, stabbed, chopped, lifted, horizontally, hit, buckled, flipped, and supported, like a pair of ghostly whips. Li Yundong was surrounded by Ziyuan in the middle, and he was attacked from all directions. However, he did not panic, nor did he play a game of circling with Ziyuan. He was originally a little unconvinced, but at this time, seeing such a fierce battle between Li Yundong and Ziyuan, he was really convinced. It turns out that Ziyuan hasn't used her full strength just now. More cultivators saw that Li Yundong had fought continuously, and at this time, he was fighting Ziyuan. Not only did he not show any signs of weakness, but he also became braver. The more he fought, the more powerful his Jinqi seemed to be. This made all of them change their expressions. Is this guy a monster? Doesn't he know how to be tired? How strong is his Jinqi? It's so bottomless. This is really terrifying. Just as they were sighing, the winner of the battle between Li Yundong and Ziyuan was suddenly decided for no reason. When Ziyuan slapped at Li Yundong's waist, for some reason, Li Yundong didn't dodge. Instead, he let go of his flaw and let Ziyuan hit him. Ziyuan was slightly stunned. Just as she was about to hit Li Yundong's waist, her palm moved and missed the position of his kidney. She slapped the side of Li Yundong's waist. But as soon as she slapped down, she immediately felt a very powerful force rebound from Li Yundong's body. Ziyuan was shocked. He has fought with others so many times, but he still has such a powerful Jinqi. However, Li Yundong deliberately showed a flaw. The moment Ziyuan hit him, the Jinqi in his body, which had been cultivated by the heavenly Jin Dan technique, suddenly burst out to fight back. Li Yundong roared and threw a punch at her. This loud roar made everyone's heart skip a beat. Li Yundong's punch squeezed and twisted the air. Zi Yuan only had time to block it with both hands before she was blasted away by this force. The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. They couldn't believe their eyes. Even Jinren Zi Yuan has been defeated? Ruan Hongling was shocked and immediately flew to support her. She saw that after Zi Yuan landed, she staggered and a trace of blood flowed out of the corner of her mouth. Ruan Hongling immediately said angrily to Li Yundong, "How could you be so ruthless?" Li Yundong was also shocked. He subconsciously wanted to go up and check on Zi Yuan's injury, but he quickly reacted and stopped his steps. He just cupped his hands and said lightly, "Thank you for letting me win." Ruan Hongling raised her eyebrows. Just as she was about to curse, Zi Yuan held her down and forced herself to say, "Jinren Li is so powerful. I admit defeat." As she said this, she waved her hand and recalled her personal powerful magical weapon. Then, she turned around and flew away. Ruan Hongling also flew away with her. The two of them turned into a beam of blue light and flew far away. Ruan Hongling complained, "Sister Zi Yuan, you don't have to put on such a realistic act for that guy, do you? I thought you were really injured." However, Zi Yuan's face was solemn. She shook her head slightly and said, "No, that was Li Yundong's full-force attack just now. With the strength of his Jinqi, he could condense it into a punch. The power was so great that I couldn't resist it." Ruan Hongling was shocked. "What? You were really injured by him?" Zi Yuan nodded gently and frowned slightly. "Yes, I'm going back to meditate in seclusion to heal." Ruan Hongling stomped her feet and said angrily, "Sister Zi Yuan, how could this guy be so ruthless?" "No, I'm going to make trouble for him." Zi Yuan glared at her angrily. "How can you make trouble for him? Now even I am no match for him." As she said this, she suddenly sighed, and there was a meaningful and complicated look in her eyes. From today on, he will become famous after this battle. From now on, his name will be known all over the world. /OM/45278941954 Chapter 274. Go to watch net. Zi Yuan took the lead to leave, making the cultivators of the major sects unable to stand still. Zhou Ping saw that Zi Yuan was bleeding from the corner of her mouth. Li Yundong's punch just now was so powerful that no one on the field could stop it. It was obviously not a fake fight. She couldn't say anything more, just stamped her feet and snorted. "You're ruthless. Our Jingyi school will get back at you sooner or later. Li Yundong, don't get too cocky." She shouted to the short and fat disciple beside her, "Let's go." With that, the three of them quickly flew away. Watch net. 7 KOM. For a time, the people of the Jingyi school and the Linggong sect of the Jingyi school also left. Two top masters and several experts on the field had left, and the people of the other sects also retreated one after another. Du Fei of the Chuanjin sect of Dragon Gate was the first to salute and said, "Jinren Li, today you forced yourself to come forward and defeated 9 masters of our major sects in a row. Your magical power is amazing. However, I have a few words to say, but I don't know if I should say them." Li Yundong's face was solemn. He cupped his hands and said, "Please speak." Du Fei said loudly, "Today, we, the Chuanjin sect of Dragon Gate, will let bygones be bygones for the time being. But in the future, I hope that Jinren Li will advise the Fox Zen school not to do evil and not to do petty things. Otherwise, it won't be so easy to talk to next time. No matter how powerful you are, don't even think about making our sects give up." Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "Of course." Du Fei snorted, then turned to the Chuanjin Dragon sect and shouted, "Let's go." A disciple from the Chuanjin Dragon sect whispered, "Senior Martial Brother, are we going to leave just like that?" Du Fei glared at him. You're not convinced? Then go up and fight him. The disciple immediately retracted his head and muttered in a low voice, so many people were beaten back by him alone. If word of this spreads, what will others say about us? Du Fei was furious and scolded, what is more important than winning or losing in this world? It was a promise. A man's promise was worth its weight in gold, and he would naturally keep it. The scariest thing than losing a battle was losing credibility. If you're not leaving, then I'll leave. After that, he strode out of the Taoist temple. The disciples of the Chuanjian dragon sect chased after him. Senior brother, wait for us. The Chuanjian dragon sect was a big sect among the 6 great sects. As soon as they left, there was a large empty space. The cultivators of the other sects looked at each other. Watch net. At this time, the short, fat Dang Chang jumped out, cupped his hands, and said with a smile, genuinely, thank you for showing mercy just now. We, the Penglai sect, are convinced. Goodbye. Before he could finish his words, a cultivator mocked, you are the only one in the Penglai sect. What are you pretending for? Dang Chang acted as if he didn't hear this. He smiled and touched the scar on the top of his head, shaking his head as he walked away. As soon as he left, the Jinshan sect also took their leave. Then, the cultivators of the major sects left like a tide. Only some cultivators who were greedy for the powerful magical weapons of the Fox Zen school reluctantly looked back after every step. Zheng Yuan, the leader of the Yin Yang sect in Mount Wuhua, stared at Li Yundong with sparkling eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. At this time, Ding Nan saw that Li Yundong had single-handedly forced back so many people from the major sections. He stood alone in the field and looked down at all the heroes. He could really be considered a hero. Dugu Chiobai. For a moment, her heart was in a mess, as if a bottle of flavors had been knocked over. Ding Nan whispered to Zheng Yuan, Master, are we still not leaving? Zheng Yuan narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, you go first. I'll be there in a minute. Seeing that the cultivators had left one after another, Li Yundong turned around and walked quickly to Lu Ye's side. After his series of battles, although Lu Yi looked very encouraged and nervous, when the victory was decided, he breathed a sigh of relief and suddenly couldn't take it anymore. Li Yundong saw that Lu Yi was breathing less and more. He nervously grabbed Lu Ye's hand and wanted to transfer Jinqi to him. However, Lu Yi struggled to wave his hand and said with difficulty, You want to find Su Chan's whereabouts. I know. But I have a presumptuous request. For the sake of me, an old man who is about to die, please promise me, okay? Li Yundong vaguely guessed what Lu Yi was going to say, and a look of embarrassment appeared on his face. Seeing this, Lu Yi panted and said, Don't worry. Even if it's Su Chan, she will also want you to do this. Li Yundong said in a deep voice, Go ahead. The corner of Lu Ye's mouth twitched, and he forced a smile and said, You've seen it. Our Fox Zen school has been bullied. They want to kill us and destroy us. In the future, when I'm gone, if there's no strong leader, they will be bullied sooner or later. Let's go. As he spoke, Lu Yi suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood from the corner of his mouth. It was dark red, and it was obvious that he couldn't hold on for long. He suddenly grabbed Li Yundong's hand tightly and said, Do you want Su Chan to lose her sect in the future? If you take over the Fox Zen school and become the leader, Su Chan will be very happy. Li Yundong frowned and said, But I'm so young, and... He wanted to say, I'm not a fox spirit. But he glanced at the other disciples of the Fox Zen school around him and didn't finish his sentence. Lu Yi seemed to know what Li Yundong was thinking. He gasped and said, Extraordinary times call for extraordinary things. Right now, there is no one more suitable to be the leader of the Fox Zen school than you. If you don't take over, the danger of the Fox Zen school's destruction will come tomorrow. I won't die in peace. Chao Yi, who was standing to one side, also said with tears in her eyes, Shirbo leader, don't say any more. At worst, we can hide our identities in the future. If the Fox Zen school disappears, let it disappear. After she finished speaking, the other female disciples of the Fox Zen school also covered their mouths and sobbed. Li Yundong couldn't bear to see women cry, especially a group of beautiful women. He immediately sighed and said, "Well, I'll try my best. If there is a better candidate in the future, I will pass the position of the leader to him." Seeing Li Yundong agree, Lu Yi immediately relaxed. He also loosened his old, thin hand that was holding Li Yundong tightly and slowly lowered it. He murmured softly, "In the future, you have to treat them better and lead them to the right path. If there are any disobedient ones, you can deal with them no matter how you deal with them." In addition, Su Chan is in Dongwu City. The more Lu Yi spoke, the lower his voice became. Gradually, he lowered his head and finally fell silent. Li Yundong felt his pulse and found that there was no pulse at all. It was obvious that he had passed away. He suddenly became anxious. "Hey, where is Dongwu City? Can you finish your sentence?" F***ck, is it true that all the people who are about to die are half-hearted? At this time, the remaining disciples of the Fox Zen school burst into tears. For a moment, the Taoist field was gloomy, and the sound of crying shook the sky. Li Yundong sighed, shook his head, stood up, and remained silent. Chao Yi, the sixth disciple of the Fox Zen school, was obviously the best at making decisions among the disciples. She stood up, wiped her tears, and asked, "Leader, what should we do now?" 2 days ago, Li Yundong was still a college student. Now, in the blink of an eye, he had become the leader of a cultivation sect. This change in identity and role made him a little uncomfortable. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "Don't call me leader. Just call me Li Yundong." Chao Yi took a step back, shook her head, and said respectfully, "There is a difference in seniority." Then, she said to the other disciples of the Fox Zen school, "Everyone, come and pay your respects to the leader." The disciples of the Fox Zen school stood up one after another and stood side by side with Chao Yi. They bowed to Li Yundong, causing him to hurriedly say, "You don't have to do this, you don't have to do this." However, Chao Yi insisted, "Our Fox Zen school has suffered such a disaster. Although our vitality has been greatly damaged and our sect has withered, etiquette cannot be abolished. If the leader doesn't agree, we won't get up." Li Yundong had no choice but to let them be. Seeing a group of beautiful women in Taoist robes kowtow to him, he felt very strange. After they finished bowing, Chao Yi got up and introduced the disciples of the Fox Zen school to Li Yundong one by one. These disciples were all women. There were 11 of them, including Chao Yi. All of them were so beautiful that Li Yundong was dazzled. When these fox spirits greeted Li Yundong, their eyes wandered and they boldly looked at the young and handsome new leader. When they retreated, they whispered to each other, "This is really rare. In the history of our Fox Zen school, there have only been 3 men who have been the leader, including him. Isn't that right? He's still a pure human, not a fox demon. It's the first time in the history of our Fox Zen school that a foreign being has been the leader." Li Yundong heard their whispers clearly, and he felt more and more awkward in his heart. Standing in the field, he felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. After everyone had introduced themselves, Chao Yi asked, "Leader, what are your plans now?" Li Yundong sighed and said, "I hope you don't mind me telling you the truth. I came here because I was worried about Su Chan's safety. I couldn't stand them bullying the few, so I intervened. But I didn't expect that I would become the leader of the Fox Zen school. I'm burning with anxiety now. I just want to go to Dongwu City to find Su Chan immediately. Only by finding her first can I calm down. I hope you can understand." Chao Yi glanced at Li Yundong and thought to herself, "I didn't expect this new leader to be such a romantic." She said, "Then what should we do?" Li Yundong pondered for a while and said, "I think the major sects should care about their reputation and won't come back. But if there are any thieves with ulterior motives coming, you might as well disperse first and come back after the limelight has passed. I'll wait for you here. I'll go to Dongwu City to find Su Chan and come back. What do you think? Chao Yi opened her mouth and wanted to object, but she saw that although Li Yundong's tone was one of negotiation, his eyes were firm. It was obvious that he had made up his mind, so she changed her mind and said, there's no need to disperse. Although the major sects are a little shameless, they still have credibility. Even if there are some thieves coming, we can deal with them. Leader, please come back quickly. Our Fox Zen school can't be without a leader. Li Yundong smiled and said, it's a group of foxes without a leader. Chao Yi smiled slightly. Just as she was about to speak, her expression suddenly changed. She shouted at the person behind Li Yundong, who is it? Li Yundong turned around abruptly, only to see a cloud of black smoke quickly passing by Yi Yu's body. Chao Yi pointed at the black smoke, and two amei short thorns quickly shot out of her sleeves. The thorns stabbed into the ground with a thud, but they missed. After the black smoke passed by, it let out a burst of laughter. Before Li Yundong could chase after it, it quickly left. The black smoke went all the way to the foot of the mountain before slowly condensing into a human figure. It was Zheng Yuan of the Yinyang sect. Zheng Yuan looked at the Fox Zen school on the top of the mountain and laughed. He waved to Ding Nan, who was standing not far away, and said, Pinger, let's go. Ding Nan looked at him in confusion. Master, where did you go just now? Zheng Yuan proudly took out a golden hairpin from his sleeve and shook it in front of her. Look, what is this? Ding Nan looked at it and saw that the golden hairpin was about 5 inches long. Its tip was faintly flowing with silver-gray light, and its tail was a phoenix tail pattern with a golden tassel hanging from it. It looked exquisite. Ding Nan asked curiously, this seems to be the powerful magical weapon that Yan Fang used to sneak attack Yi. Zheng Yuan laughed and said, yes, this is the threaded hairpin of soul traversing of the Fox Zen school. It's a good powerful magical weapon. How could I, Zheng Yuan, return empty-handed from this trip? Good Pinger, when we return to the mountain, I will pass this powerful magical weapon to you. Then you will know the magic of this powerful magical weapon. After that, he reached out to pull Ding Nan's wrist. When their skin touched, Zheng Yuan intentionally scratched her palm with his fingers. Ding Nan smiled slightly, as if she hadn't noticed it, but she sneered in her heart, old pervert, how dare you have any ideas about me? You must be tired of living. I should go find the little girl next. Chapter 275. Go to watch net. Chao Yi quickly rushed to Yi Yu's body, took a look, stamped her feet, and gritted her teeth. I don't know which shameless person took away my Shiji's threaded hairpin of soul traversal. Humph. Luckily, I discovered it in time. Otherwise, junior sister Yi Yu's icy Vajra wheel would have been seized by him. After that, she thought of something and picked up the Vajra wheel beside Yi Yu. She held it in front of Li Yundong with both hands and said, Leader, this is my shimmy Yi Yu's powerful magical weapon. Please accept it. Watch net. Li Yundong frowned but didn't take it. He asked, why don't you keep your shimmy's things for me? Chao Yi said, this powerful magical weapon was left to shimmy Yi Yu by the former leader. Now that the former leader and Yi Yu are dead, it is naturally handed over to the current leader, that is, you, to keep. In the future, if you have your own disciple, you can pass on this magical treasure and make it flourish. After pondering for a while, Li Yundong took the Vajra wheel with both hands and felt that it was heavy. The shape of this powerful magical weapon was very much like a crescent moon when the moon was waning. One side was silver, with a beautiful flying bodhisattva painted on it, and the other side was gold, with a ferocious and brave Vajra Arhat painted on it. Li Yundong stroked the Vajra chakram with his fingers, only to feel that it was cold to the touch. Especially when his fingertips touched the blade on the outside of the Vajra chakram, he suddenly felt a threatening chill from the blade, which made his hair stand on end. This magical weapon is really strange. Li Yundong said, pointing at the serrated blade on the inside of the Vajrachakram. Why are its serrated teeth inside? Chao Yi smiled slightly and said, in fact, there are also serrations on the outside, but the serrations are so small that they are almost invisible to the naked eye. Once it rotates, this Vajra wheel can cut almost any hard object. The inner serrations are actually more used to lock the opponent's weapon in combat. Sect leader, you can experience the wondrous uses of this magical treasure in the future after you subdue it. Li Yundong nodded. He wanted to put the powerful magical weapon away, but he felt that it was inconvenient. I run around with the fan of 7 treasures on my back all day long. It's already very annoying. I can't run around with this thing on my back, can I? If the police see this, they'll probably arrest me as a controlled object, right? Chao Yi covered her mouth and laughed. As the leader of a sect, are you afraid of the secular police? Li Yundong spread his hands. Am I supposed to hide in the mountains for the rest of my life? Entering the world to cultivate naturally has to follow the rules of the world. Chao Yi thought for a moment, took out 2 small colorful brocade pouches from her side, and said, I have 100 treasures bag here. Although it's small, it's actually a spirit space inside, which can be used to store all kinds of things. However, it had a disadvantage. It could be stored, but it couldn't be taken out. If you want to take it, you have to destroy this 100 treasures pouch in order to take it out. Chao Yi held the bag with both hands and handed it to Li Yunyang, saying, Leader, since it's not convenient for you, you can take this first. Colorful articles. Learn, net. Super_speed. More. New. Li Yundong shook his head and said, This is yours. How can I use it? And if I encounter an enemy and need to use a powerful magical weapon, won't your bag be destroyed? Chao Yi smiled and said, Leader, you're treating me like an outsider. If it weren't for you, we would have died long ago, and all our treasures would have become someone else's. Go to CNET. 7KOM. This is also a small token of my appreciation. You saved our Fox Zen school and so many of our fellow disciples. If you don't use it, won't you disappoint us? Li Yundong thought about it and felt that what Chao Yi had said was true. He didn't want to be pretentious, so he smiled and took it. However, as soon as he took it, he handed it back and said with some embarrassment, I don't know how to use it. Chao Yi suddenly widened her eyes and said in disbelief, You don't know how to use it? Li Yundong smiled and said, I've only been cultivating for less than half a year, and I only know a little about Shintong magic, so I really don't know how to use it. Li Yundong's words made all the people of the Fox Zen school look at him. This group of fox spirits stared at Li Yundong with their eyes wide open and tongue-tied. Chao Yi even stammered, What did you say? You've only been cultivating for less than half a year? Leader, you're not joking, are you? Li Yundong smiled and said, I'm really not joking. I only met Su Chan a few months ago. After meeting her, I started cultivating. Chao Yi sucked in a breath of cold air and said with a face full of shock, You can reach such a level after half a year of cultivation. Leader, you can be said to be the first person in the cultivation world in the past 5,000 years. Li Yundong laughed and said, The first person in the history of cultivation doesn't even know how to use a bag. You can laugh at me as much as you want. When Chao Yi saw that Li Yundong's words were funny and easygoing, she couldn't help laughing and saying, As the saying goes, there are specializations in every field. We cultivators only know how to eat vegetarian food and chant sutras, so when the enemy comes to our door, not only can we not subdue the demons, but we also become a burden to the sect. As she spoke, she spread the bag in her hand on her palm and touched the mouth of the bag with her finger. Then, the bag opened by itself and emitted a dazzling 7-colored brilliance. Chao Yi said, Leader, please put your powerful magical weapon in. Li Yunyang clicked his tongue in wonder. He put the huge and heavy fan of 7 treasures and the cold and sharp chakram into it. As soon as the two powerful magical weapons touched the seven-colored brilliance, they immediately slid into it and disappeared. Qiao Yi then gently touched the mouth of the bag again. The mouth of the bag automatically closed by itself, and the seven-colored brilliance also disappeared. Qiao Yi handed an empty bag in a bag filled with magical weapons to Li Yundong and said, "When you need to use a treasure, you only need to tear this bag and the powerful magical weapon will automatically jump out. Go to the internet." 7 KOM. Li Yundong took the two bags, which were less than the size of a palm, and said with a smile, "These are good things. It's really inconvenient to carry the fan of 7 treasures all day long." He tied the bag with the powerful magical weapon to his waist and hid the other one close to his body. He said with a smile, "Then I'll go to Dongwu City first. Take care of yourself. I'll be back soon." Seeing that he was about to leave, Qiao Yi said, "Leader, do you know where Su Chan is exactly?" Li Yundong immediately stopped and said with a wry smile, "Your former leader didn't have time to tell me before he died." Qiao Yi asked, "Dongwu City is so big. Where are you going to find the leader?" Li Yundong sighed and said, "How would I know? If I can't find her, I'll just send a missing person notice." Qiao Yi immediately said, "Don't do that. Even if we cultivators enter the secular world to cultivate, we can't make our names public. Otherwise, we will attract the attention of some cultivators lurking in the secular world and it is very likely to cause unnecessary trouble." Li Yundong sighed and said, "Then I can only look for her one by one." Qiao Yi said, "I know a place where Ao Wushuang used to stay in Dongwu City. I think Su Chan will be there." Li Yundong was overjoyed. "Really? Where is she?" Qiao Yi said, "Dongwu City, Shantang Chili." Li Yundong asked, "Shantang Chili? Is that a place name?" Qiao Yi nodded and said, "It's a tourist attraction in Dongwu City. It's 7 miles long, so it's called Shantang Chili." Li Yundong asked again, "Where is she in Shantang Chili?" Qiao Yi smiled and said, "I don't know. Leader, you should be able to find her when you get there. It's not that big." Li Yundong nodded and didn't stay any longer. He quickly walked down the mountain and left. Qiao Yi looked at his departing figure and sighed inwardly. Fortunately, our Fox Zen school is not fated to die. At such a critical moment, we have such a young and promising leader. How lucky we are. Li Yundong quickly left Mount Tianlong, stopped a car nearby, and headed for Dongwu City. After about an hour's journey, Li Yundong entered the downtown area of Dongwu City. Dongwu City was an ancient city with a history of thousands of years. Along the way, Li Yundong saw that the city was like an old city. In addition to all kinds of cars running on the street and many fashionable shops on both sides of the road, it retained the ancient cultural atmosphere of an ancient city everywhere. Even the bus station had cornices and arches, full of ancient charm. After another 20 minutes, Li Yundong followed the stone road to the busiest pedestrian square in Dongwu City. The driver put him down, pointed to the front, and said, "That's where you want to go. Take a few steps." After Li Yundong paid, the driver stepped on the accelerator, and the car roared as it took a turn at the T-junction. Li Yundong was left standing alone at the intersection, looking at the stone archway across the street. The archway was painted red, and 4 golden characters were written on it in bold calligraphy, Shantang, Chili. When Li Yundong saw these words, he remembered that he was about to see Su Chan, who he had been thinking about day and night, and that he was about to see his beloved girl. For a moment, he couldn't help but get excited. His breathing was a little uneven, and his heart was beating wildly. Li Yundong took a deep breath and walked toward Shantang Chili. He crossed the asphalt road and walked onto a round arch bridge paved with stones. Li Yundong walked into Shantang Chili, a famous tourist attraction in Dongwu City. As soon as he got off the bridge, Li Yundong saw that both sides of the street were old buildings. They had white walls and black tiles, cornices and arches, and the road was paved with bluestone. The shops on the street had colorful flags with the names of the shops written on them. On both sides of the road, there were also roadside stalls selling all kinds of antique gadgets. Several young girls were greeting passing customers with red lips, white teeth, and bright eyes. When Li Yundong walked into Shantang Chili, he saw that many of the doors of the houses were still made of wood. If it weren't for the many fashionable tourists on the street, Li Yundong would have thought that he had returned to ancient times hundreds of years ago. Li Yundong walked to the door of a snack bar and saw that there were 7 or 8 square tables in the snack bar. Many customers were eating butter pancakes and noodles at the table, eating happily. Li Yundong stopped a young waitress and asked, "Excuse me, do you know Su Chan?" "Oh, she is about 1.65 meters tall, has a good figure, and is very beautiful. She looks about 16 or 17 years old." The waitress looked at Li Yundong with a plate in her hand, smiled, and said in a soft Wu accent, "Do you know her? Do you want to go somewhere else?" Li Yundong was dumbfounded when he heard this. He felt that the other party spoke very fast, as if she was speaking a foreign language, and he couldn't understand a word. He stammered, "What did you say?" The girl smiled and said in Mandarin, "Aren't you from Dongwu?" "I don't know either." "You can go somewhere else and ask." Li Yundong suddenly understood and turned to leave. He walked along the bluestone road of Shantang Chili. When he passed by a pearl shop, he knocked on the door and asked loudly, "Is anyone there?" A bell-like voice immediately came from inside. "Hey, I'm coming." Li Yundong saw a slim girl running out of the shop, her black braids bouncing. The girl's face was a little hard to see in the dark and deep shop, but the outline of her figure was somewhat similar to Su Chan's. Li Yundong's heart suddenly thumped wildly. He subconsciously opened his mouth and stared at the girl with wide eyes. But when the girl got closer, Li Yundong was disappointed to find that the girl only looked like Su Chan when she was running. She didn't look like Su Chan at all. Li Yundong was disappointed, but he still politely asked about Su Chan's whereabouts. The girl was also very disappointed when she saw that Li Yundong wasn't here to buy pearls, but she saw that Li Yundong was handsome and dignified. She had a good impression of him, so she said with a smile, "I don't know the person you're talking about. You can go ahead and ask." Li Yundong nodded at her with a smile and continued walking along the street. The girl stood at the entrance of the pearl shop and raised her head to look at his back as he left. She whispered softly in Wunong's soft language, "Oh my God, she's really pretty. I wonder if she's my boyfriend's friend." Li Yundong didn't know that he was born with love and that girls liked him wherever he went. He continued walking along the street and was about to ask again when he suddenly heard a voice coming from not far away. "Hey, third Shixiang, how do you think Master will deal with this evildoer this time?" "I don't know. Maybe he will burn and purify her." "Oh, don't ask so many questions. Hurry up and eat. Master called us back from afar. He must have called us back for a ritual. I think this evildoer's cultivation is not shallow this time. Otherwise, he wouldn't have called all the Shixiang and Shimi of the temple back." "Third Shixiang, I heard from Shixiang Wuhua that we will have a disaster this time." "Humph, do you believe that guy's words? A guy who is obsessed with beauty all day long, how much cultivation can he have?" As soon as Li Yundong heard these words, his hair immediately stood on end and he became highly vigilant. He thought to himself, "Could it be that my girl has been caught?" Li Yundong turned his head and saw 2 bald monks in brown robes eating in a nearby noodle shop. Li Yundong subconsciously wanted to rush in and ask the 2 monks if they had caught Su Chan, but he was also afraid of alerting the enemy, so he also pretended to enter the noodle shop to eat. He ordered a bowl of noodles, sat in a corner, and secretly stared at the 2 monks. The 2 monks were only whispering to each other, but they didn't notice that they had been stared at by Li Yundong. After eating the noodles, they paid and continued on their way. Li Yundong immediately followed them. The waiter behind him came up with the noodles and shouted, "Sir, your noodles." Li Yundong threw down a red note, not caring about the change, and immediately followed the two monks from afar. //7854627895541 Chapter 276. Go to watch net. Along the way, the two monks walked very fast. After following them for about an hour, they arrived in front of a temple. Watch net. 7 K.O.M. From afar, Li Yundong saw the two monks walk to the back door of the temple and knock on the copper ring on the wooden door. Then, with a creak, the door opened to the left and right, and a middle-aged monk walked out. When the two monks saw the middle-aged monk, they immediately put their palms together and bowed. Martial uncle. The middle-aged monk nodded and said in a deep voice, "You're back. We've been waiting for you. Come in." After that, he made way for the two monks to enter the door. The moment he closed the door, he glanced at Li Yundong in the distance, intentionally or unintentionally. Li Yundong only felt that this glance was unusually sharp, and his heart suddenly skipped a beat. Li Yundong saw that the other party was sneaky and on guard. He was more and more certain that the other party was doing something shameful in the temple. He quickly walked to the wooden door and wanted to break in. But when Li Yundong approached, he saw a talisman on each side of the two wooden doors. The talisman was painted with golden Sanskrit and black Vajra. Li Yundong reached out to push the door open, but the golden Sanskrit on the talisman lit up by itself. At this moment, Li Yundong suddenly felt an extremely terrifying and dangerous aura rushing toward him. Li Yundong immediately withdrew his hand. As soon as he withdrew his hand, he saw that the shining golden Sanskrit slowly dimmed again. He frowned and took 2 steps back. He wanted to climb over the wall, but he suddenly found that the black tiles on the wall were also pasted with talismans, but they were pressed by the black tiles. If he didn't look carefully, he wouldn't be able to see them. There must be something wrong with this temple. Li Yundong sneered in his heart. As he thought about it, he quickly arrived at the main entrance of the temple. Shiyuan Temple was an ancient temple with a history of 800 years. It was also a famous tourist attraction in Dongwu City. There was a large parking lot at the main entrance. Several large buses were parked in the parking lot, and a steady stream of passengers got off them. The leading passenger was holding a small red flag in his hand and shouting loudly. Li Yundong was worried about Su Chan's safety. Ignoring the long line at the ticket office, he squeezed his way to the front of the line and shoved a tourist aside. "Buy me a ticket," he said anxiously, handing the money into the window. When he cut the queue, the people behind him couldn't take it anymore and shouted, "Hey, don't you know the rules? Line up and buy tickets." The one who was pushed away by Li Yundong was a young woman. She also hurriedly shouted, "What are you doing? Line up, where are your manners?" At this time, Li Yundong was so anxious that he couldn't care less about this. He turned his head and glared at these people coldly. Watch net. These tourists only felt that Li Yundong was glaring at them. His eyes were so terrifying and sharp that their hearts skipped a beat. Whatever they wanted to say was stuck in their throats, and they couldn't say it no matter how hard they tried. After Li Yundong bought the tickets, he apologized to these people and hurried into the temple. When Li Yundong had gone far away, these tourists felt the oppressive and suffocating atmosphere relax. They took a breath and began to curse again. Especially the young woman who had been pushed away by Li Yundong before. She stamped her feet and cursed. A woman next to her approached and said to her, "Lan Lan, what's wrong?" When the woman named Lan Lan saw this woman, she immediately said, "Wuxia, you came at the right time. When I was buying a ticket just now, I met a guy who pushed me away. There are so many people waiting in line to buy tickets. They are all obeying the rules, but he doesn't. Is he in a hurry to be reincarnated?" The woman named Wuxia was the female tour guide Li Yundong had met in Tibet before. Today, she was wearing an orange tour guide uniform and a pink round sun hat on her head. Her wavy black hair was exposed from the brim of the hat, making her look fashionable and graceful. She was holding a handheld DV camera in her hand and said with a smile, "Really? When we enter the garden, we'll take a good picture of him. When the time comes, we'll expose him and let thousands of righteous netizens denounce him." Hearing this, Lon Lon was overjoyed. She nodded vigorously and said repeatedly, "Yes, yes, yes." After buying the tickets, she distributed them to every tourist in the travel agency. Then, she and Lu Xia led the tourists into Shiyuan Temple. When they arrived at the Mahavira Hall, the tour guide Lu Xia took pictures of the scenery of the Mahavira Hall and the tourists in the garden. Lon Lon, the tour guide, loudly explained the history and customs of the Mahavira Hall to the tourists. After Lon Lon finished her explanation, she suddenly pulled Lu Xia aside and whispered, "Hey, Lu Xia, I found that guy." Lu Xia was stunned. "Which guy?" Lon Lon gnashed her teeth and said, "It's the guy who cut the queue and pushed me aside." Lu Xia couldn't help laughing. "Do you still remember this matter? I really admire you." Lon Lon said angrily, "You weren't pushed aside by him, so of course you don't remember. Hurry up and tell me, are you coming with me or not?" Lu Xia looked embarrassed. She glanced at the tourists who were visiting the Mahavira Hall and said, "We are leading a group, sister." Lon Lon giggled, turned around, and said loudly to the tourists, "Everyone is free to move around in the temple for 30 minutes. Don't wander around. Come back here in 30 minutes. The tourists responded loudly and immediately dispersed. Lon Lon turned around and said with a smile, "It's settled." Lu Xia smiled bitterly and shook her head. "You're not afraid of being complained. I really admire you." Lon Lon laughed and said, "You've already gone out to take private work. What am I afraid of? How was the trip to Tibet exciting?" For no reason, Lu Xia thought of the ghost-like man who looked like a god. She was stunned for a moment, but she quickly reacted. She shook her head and said, "Don't talk about these useless things. Where is the person you're talking about? Go take a look and come back. Go to the internet." 7 KOM. Lon Lon said angrily, "What's the use of taking a look? We have to take a picture of his ugly face and dirty crimes and then put it on the internet to expose the despicable behavior of such a shameless person." Lu Xia pressed her temples and shook her head. "I really can't offend you. It's just cutting the queue. You're making him look like a traitor." Lon Lon stomped her feet and said, "Are you going to help me or not?" Lu Xia begged for mercy. Okay, I'll help. Where is he?" Lon Lon pulled Lu Xia along the corridor and walked to a hidden wooden door. She looked around and saw that there was no one around. She pointed at the lock of the wooden door and said, "Look, the lock has been broken by him." Lu Xia looked over and saw that one of the copper locks had been pulled out of shape. She was shocked and said in a low voice, "What great strength." Lon Lon immediately pressed down on her arm and complained, "Yes, I still feel pain from the hit just now." Lu Xia rolled her eyes at her. "You bitch, he hit the other side of you." Lon Lon also rolled her eyes at her. "The wound has been transferred. Can't you do that?" As she spoke, she was about to push the door open and go in. However, Lu Xia grabbed her and pointed at the 2 lines of words on the door. "The monastery is an important place. Idlers are not allowed to enter." She said, "Look, you're not allowed to enter." Lon Lon said anxiously, "If that guy can enter, why can't we? Look, he even broke the lock. Maybe he went in to steal something. We are acting bravely for a just cause." After that, she pushed the door open and barged in. Lu Xia couldn't stop her, so she could only stomp her feet and follow in. When the 2 of them entered the door, they saw that they were in a forest. There were peach trees everywhere, and there were many talismans hanging on the peach trees. These talismans were dazzling, giving the forest a solemn and inviolable sense of majesty. At a glance, Lon Lon saw a man standing in the middle of the open space in the middle of the forest. She pointed and immediately wanted to speak loudly, but Lu Xia covered her mouth and pulled her to hide behind the forest. Lu Xia covered Lanlan's mouth and stared at the figure with her eyes wide open. This figure was too familiar to her. Even if it turned into ashes, she would still recognize it. Isn't this the cultivator who looks like a god? Lu Xia's heart was beating wildly. She made a silent gesture to Lanlan, then let go of her hand that was covering her mouth. She wrote on her palm and said, "Don't speak. Let's see what happens first." Lanlan nodded and also wrote on her palm, "Shoot him and expose him." Lu Xia nodded, held her breath, and picked up the DV in her hand to shoot. Before she could turn it on, she heard a Buddhist chant. A middle-aged monk slowly walked out from the other end of the forest and said, "Amitabha. Benefactor, why did you break into the temple?" Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "I want to ask if your temple has ever seen a girl named Su Chan." Lu Xia was hiding in the bushes, so she could only see Li Yundong's back. She couldn't see his face, so although she was 90% sure that it was him, she couldn't be sure. But at this time, as soon as Li Yundong opened his mouth, her heart shook and she concluded, it really is him. She cheered up, turned on the DV, and began to secretly shoot. There were talismans everywhere in the forest, and powerful Buddhist power was everywhere. This power covered up the aura of Lu Xia and Lanlan. Li Yundong didn't notice that there were two women kissing him more than 10 meters away from him. The middle-aged monk's attention was also focused on Li Yundong, the uninvited guest, and he didn't notice the existence of Lu Xia and Lanlan. He whispered the name of Buddha and said, "There are countless living beings in the world. In front of Buddha, there is no distinction between men and women, let alone Su Chan and Li Chan." Li Yundong was worried about Su Chan's safety and was extremely anxious. Seeing that the other party was still talking to him calmly, he said impatiently, "If you've seen her, then you've seen her. If you haven't seen her, then you haven't seen her. What are you talking about?" The middle-aged monk chanted the name of Buddha again and said, "Amitabha, if you've seen her, then you haven't seen her. If you haven't seen her, then you have." When Li Yundong heard this, he became angry. *CK, I said that sex is emptiness, emptiness is sex. You're beating around the bush with me. It's obvious that you're trying to stall for time. Li Yundong sneered and said, "You're beating around the bush with me. You just won't answer my question. Is there a ghost in your heart?" The middle-aged monk asked, "What is a ghost? What is a ghost?" Li Yundong said angrily, "Whether there is a ghost or not, I can tell at a glance. Get out of the way." After that, he was about to rush inside. However, the middle-aged monk chanted the name of Buddha, pushed his palm, and clasped his thumb inward. A Mahamudra came out of the air and slapped toward Li Yundong. Li Yundong's Jinqi immediately flowed all over his body, and his bones crackled like beans being fried. He made a Vajra fist with both hands. The index finger of his left hand was straight, and the little finger of his right hand was wrapped around the first section of the index finger of his left hand. In the blink of an eye, his Mahamudra was shattered. Li Yundong was also shocked. This middle-aged monk looks ordinary. How could he be a cultivation master? How many such experts were there in this temple? Although I am not afraid of one, if there are more, I will not be able to take it. No, I have to end this quickly. He secretly made up his mind. The middle-aged monk knew that the temple was currently open to the public. If the commotion here was too big, it would attract unnecessary trouble. He also decided to end the battle quickly. Watch net. The middle-aged monk put his palms together and held a string of prayer beads between his thumb and index finger. He lowered his head and quickly chanted an incantation. As he chanted the incantation, the trees in the forest suddenly swayed, and the leaves rustled, undulating like waves. The talismans hanging on the branches strangely stood up one by one, and the golden characters on them glowed brightly. The countless runes in the forest emitted a dense light, and then these lights quickly turned into gossamer threads that converged on the stage. In the blink of an eye, they turned into a mighty Arhat that was as tall as 2 people. This Arhat was wearing a golden kasaya and had one arm bare. He held a Vajra scepter with both hands and glared angrily, looking awe-inspiring. The Arhat shouted loudly, and the Vajra scepter in his hand rushed straight toward Li Yundong's chest. Then, in the sky above the Arhat, a light statue of a Buddha sitting on a lotus was quickly formed and smashed toward Li Yunyang. Before Li Yundong was hit, he felt as if a mountain had fallen on his head. It was so dark that it made it hard for him to breathe. He believed that when it hit him, he would be instantly turned into powder. Without thinking, Li Yundong immediately crushed the 100 treasures bag at his waist. In an instant, the fan of 7 treasures jumped out, and the chainsaw Vajra wheel fell to the ground with a clang, motionless. The treasured fan was psychic. Sensing that its master was in danger, it immediately jumped into the air. With a swoosh, the iron fan opened, and all the fan leaves jumped out, forming a fast-spinning tray in mid-air, forcibly blocking the Lotus Buddha's downward pressure. Meanwhile, the 2 ribs of the treasured fan fiercely smashed towards the lotus seat of the Buddha like iron rods. After a few smashes, golden light shot out in all directions. The lotus leaves of the lotus seat scattered in all directions, turning into specks of golden light that fell like stars. When Li Yunyang saw that the fan of 7 treasures had jumped out to protect its master, he no longer cared about the Buddha falling over his head. Instead, he quickly made 3 handprints in a row. They were the Vajra Samaya Mahamudra, the light-gathering Buddha Mahamudra, and the superior Buddha Mahamudra. Li Yunyang shouted 3 times in a row and blasted out 3 Mahamudra in a row. The first Mahamudra hit the tip of the Luohan Vajra solidly. It was like 2 high-speed trains had suddenly collided, causing the surrounding air to buzz and tremble. The ground paved with green bricks also made a muffled thud, as if an invisible giant had stomped on the ground. Watch net. 7 KOM. This time, the Luohan Vajra's momentum suddenly stopped, and its speed and strength slowed down a lot. Then, Li Yunyang slapped out another Mahamudra, slapping the Vajra and sending it flying back. The transformed Luohan caught the Vajra that had flown back. Just as it was about to fight back, it saw Li Yunyang's 3rd Mahamudra follow like a shadow and hit it like a storm. This 3rd Mahamudra was extremely fierce, and it smashed the Luohan into pieces. However, after the Luohan turned into countless golden fragments, it slowly transformed into an Luohan in mid-air, turning into a Vajra holding a copper bell. The middle-aged monk snorted and said, "Our temple has a history of nearly 800 years since it was built in the Yuan dynasty. In the past 800 years, countless monks in our temple have been chanting scriptures day and night, and countless tourists have worshipped us. The Buddhist faith is as vast as the abyss and the sea, and the Buddhist power is inexhaustible. No matter how powerful you are, you can't defeat the Vajra Buddha transformed by the Buddhist faith of our temple." After that, his fingers flew and he quickly pinched a few fingers. Many golden rays of light flew out of the peach tree, which was full of runes, and 3 Vajra Arhats appeared. They joined forces with the Vajra Arhats to attack Li Yunyang. When Li Yunyang saw this, he immediately took a deep breath. His 5 fingers were so fast that they were like afterimages. The Jinshi in his body suddenly erupted, and in the blink of an eye, he madly made 12 Mahamudra, smashing the 4 Vajra Arhats. But as soon as he smashed them, he saw that the Vajra Arhats slowly gathered together again. Li Yunyang was shocked and took a deep breath. He thought to himself, "What should I do? Wouldn't this be endless and never-ending?" He thought quickly in his heart, but his eyes fell on the middle-aged monk who was constantly chanting scriptures. His heart skipped a beat. Capture the leader first. As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Li Yundong stomped hard on the ground, causing the Vajra wheel, which had been motionless on the ground, to fly up. Without looking at it, he accurately grabbed the body of the Vajra wheel with his 5 fingers, and then threw it at the middle-aged monk. Although the Vajra wheel had not been turned into Li Yundong's own and could not be used as a magical item, it was still an extremely fierce weapon. The middle-aged monk wanted to reach out to catch Li Yundong's throw, but when he took a closer look, he saw that both sides of the Vajra wheel were sharp blades, and Li Yundong was pouncing on him like a shadow. As soon as Li Yundong's body became strong, he immediately stepped on the black tiles of the tower and made a cracking sound. These Vajra bodhisattvas and arhats were shocked by the power emanating from Li Yundong's body, and they didn't dare to come forward for a moment. Li Yundong took this opportunity to suddenly jump up a bit and jump to the 6-story tower. With a loud shout, he smashed a wooden window with his fists and broke into the tower. He saw that the tower was full of monks. The outermost monks were wearing gray robes, and there were about 100 of them. The middle monks were wearing brown robes, and there were about 20 of them. In the innermost area, there was an old monk wearing a yellow robe and a gold-threaded red cassock sitting cross-legged. He was holding Buddhist beads in one hand and knocking on a wooden fish with the other. Among these monks, there was a huge wooden pillar, which was full of shining scriptures. A woman with long black hair was tied behind the pillar with her back to Li Yundong, struggling and screaming desperately. Li Yundong had been fighting all the way here, worried about Su Chan, and had long been flustered. He roared, made a Mahamudra in his hand, and slapped the pillar in the air. With a rumble, the pillar was immediately smashed into pieces. The shining scriptures on it also lost their light. Suddenly, the people who were tied to the pillar quickly disappeared, turning into 2 extremely thick golden snakes. One on the left and one on the right, they ferociously slammed into the sides of the main hall, creating 2 holes in the main hall. Then, they fled toward the outside of the temple. Seeing this scene, Li Yundong was stunned, and there was a buzzing sound in his head. Oh no, I made a mistake. This is not Su Chan. Chapter 278. Go to watch net. At a glance, Li Yundong saw 2 big golden snakes, which were as thick as buckets and more than 10 meters long, scurrying away. He immediately realized that he had made the wrong target in his haste and mistaken Feng Jing for Mal Yang. Go to watch net. After the 2 big golden snakes fled, the pagoda became extremely quiet for a moment. All the monks looked at Li Yundong in shock. Vajra Bodhisattva and Arhat Phaetian, who had been chasing Li Yundong before, surrounded the 6th floor of the pagoda and glared at Li Yundong. Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly and sigh. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but he felt that there was no way to defend himself. He could only admit his mistake, put his palms together and said, I was reckless and trespassed here. Please punish me, master. The old monk surrounded by the monks turned around. Li Yundong saw that the old monk had deep wrinkles on his face, and his eyebrows were white and long. Not only was there no anger on his face, but his face was full of smiles. He said to the monks with a smile, my disciple Wu Hua said that our Shiyuan temple should have a calamity today, but I didn't believe it at the time. You guys should know that my disciple is a womanizer all day long. He's a flirtatious monk. He's probably been right a few times, but I didn't expect him to be right for once today. Heh, this crow's beak. Good things don't hit the mark, but bad things hit the mark. Amitba, it's a sin. After he finished speaking, he burst into laughter, and the surrounding monks also followed suit. With this laugh, the tense atmosphere in the Buddha hall dissipated a lot, and Li Yundong also relaxed a lot, as if he had just kicked over an incense burner and made a small mistake, rather than letting 2 snake demons escape. Li Yundong saw that he had rudely broken into the important place of Shiyuan Temple and fought along the way, almost tearing down the main hall of the pagoda. However, the other party was not angry. Instead, he laughed and laughed at himself. The magnanimity and broad-mindedness in his words immediately made Li Yundong admire him and admire him wholeheartedly. Li Yundong bowed respectfully, put his palms together, and said, Master, I offended your temple today. If you want to punish me, I will accept it one by one. I will never resist, and I will never complain. As Li Yundong was speaking, the middle-aged monk also caught up with him. He shouted and was about to attack, but the old monk whispered to him, Step back. The middle-aged monk immediately lowered his head and respectfully retreated, not looking at Li Yundong again. The old monk knocked on the wooden fish with his hand and chanted a few Buddhist names. All kinds of arhats, bodhisattvas, and vajras that had surrounded the 6th floor of the pagoda dispersed one after another. At this time, the old monk stood up and looked at Li Yundong carefully. He smiled, waved to Li Yundong, and said, "Benefactor, come with me." Li Yundong saw him turn around and walk down the stairs, so he put away the fan of 7 treasures and the vajra wheel and braced himself to follow him down the stairs. Then he went. 7 K.O.M. The two of them went downstairs. The old monk turned a corner and walked into the meditation room in the backyard of the temple. He lit a stick of incense and sat down on the futon. He pointed to another futon and said, "Young hero, please sit." Li Yundong sat down cross-legged on the futon and said sincerely, "I don't deserve that. Master, you're making fun of me by saying that. I'm young and impetuous. I barged my way in and caused a lot of trouble for your temple. How can I be called a hero?" The old monk chuckled. "Oh. That day, you sacrificed yourself to eliminate evil and drew lightning to strike young Master He to death. Isn't that chivalrous and righteous?" Li Yundong shuddered. His eyes widened as he stared at the old monk warily. "How did you know about this?" The old monk raised his head and laughed out loud. His voice shook the hard and sturdy bluestone ground. "If you don't want people to know, don't do it. You've caused such a big mess, and you think no one in the world knows about it? You're looking down on us. I don't dare to say for others, but the leaders of several big sects in the world definitely know about it." Li Yundong asked in confusion, "Then why don't you tell on me and arrest me?" The old monk shook his head and said with a smile, "Why should we arrest you? Do we have to arrest you because you sacrificed yourself to eliminate evil and righteous? Then what will we become? Won't we become old and dim-sighted devils? Hey, let's not talk about anything else. Just what you've done is enough to make all the cultivators in the world look at you in a different light." As the old monk spoke, he raised his head and said leisurely, "There are so many cultivators in the world. Who can be like you, who would rather suffer from lightning and enforce justice on behalf of heaven? Speaking of which, compared with you, we, the senior cultivators, are so ashamed that we can't show our faces." Li Yundong's face was full of shame. "Master, you flatter me too much. I believe that any good man who is brave, responsible, and bold will do what I did." The old monk laughed and said, "You're praising yourself in a roundabout way. Are you saying that you're brave, responsible, and bold?" Li Yundong couldn't help but chuckle. "That's not what I meant." The old monk said with a smile, "You deserve such a compliment. Alas, the more we cultivators cultivate, the more timid we become. The more we cultivate, the more we fear heavenly tribulation. We really need a young, promising, and chivalrous cultivator like you to come out and cheer up this gloomy cultivation world." As he spoke, he waved his hand at a mahogany square table not far away and took a teapot and 2 teacups. Li Yundong laughed and said, "Well said, well said." He thought that since he had taken over the Fox Zen School, he should be able to withdraw some money from the Fox Zen School first to pay for the repair of Shiyuan Temple. In the future, he would slowly make up for it. After the old monk recited a Buddhist scripture, he changed the topic and said, "Generally, do you know why I didn't care about you breaking into our temple today and destroying our cultural relics?" Li Yundong put his palms together and returned the greeting. "I think it must be because you are broad-minded and benevolent. You won't care about a rash kid like me." The old monk smiled and shook his head. "No, it's because I know that you have never done evil. On the contrary, you have made a name for yourself in the cultivation world by enforcing justice on behalf of heaven. I admire you very much, so I didn't speak ill of you. You have to know that although our Shiyuan Temple is not as long and powerful as the Shaolin Temple, it is also an ancient temple with a history of 800 years. It has a deep foundation and the majesty of Buddhism. Just now, when you broke into our 6-story pagoda, if I wanted to attack you, with the power of the Dharma of our temple, even if Celestial Master Zhang of the Jingyi school came, he would have to flee in embarrassment. Li Yundong remembered that when he had broken into the temple, he had encountered the Buddha power Vajra along the way. He couldn't help but nod in agreement and say, "Indeed, the Buddha power of your temple is powerful and majestic. It's really amazing." The old monk smiled and said, "If it were anyone else who trespassed into our temple like this, they might have been turned into millions of pieces of mustard and couldn't go back. Otherwise, if our Buddhist temple is like a vegetable garden where people can come and go as they please, where will our dignity and face be if it gets out?" When Li Yundong heard this, he stood up, bowed respectfully, and said, "Thank you for your magnanimity, Master, for not arguing with me." Speaking of this, the old monk stood up and returned the salute. We Buddhists talk about karma and retribution. As the saying goes, good will be rewarded with good, and evil will be punished with evil. It's not that there is no retribution, but that the time has not yet come. Whether it's evil or good, there will be rewards in the end. Generally, if you hadn't done a great deed of kindness, I wouldn't have said these words to you. This is the so-called karma and retribution. Hearing this, Li Yundong felt a myriad of emotions in his heart. He raised his head and sighed. I thought that it was unacceptable to the cultivation world and the world for me to be struck by lightning. I didn't expect to hear such words today. It really dispels the block in my heart. Thank you for enlightening me, Master. The old monk smiled and said, "Not at all. Justice exists in people's hearts, and good and evil exist in heaven and earth. It's our duty to punish evil and promote good. Why do you have to be so polite? By the way, I see that you are anxiously looking for Su Chan. I think I can do you a favor." Li Yundong was overjoyed. "Really? Thank you, Master." The old monk put his palms together and said, "I only hope that after Jinrenli takes over the Fox Zen school, you will restrain your disciples and not let them do evil." Li Yundong returned the salute solemnly and said, "Of course." The old monk nodded with a smile and said, "My disciples said that there will be a calamity in Shiyuan Temple today. He also said that if someone asks about the whereabouts of the target, I will tell you where you come from and where you go back. Then you will be able to find her." Hearing this, Li Yundong asked in confusion, "Do you want me to go back to Dongwu City, Fox Zen School, or Tiannan City?" The old monk smiled and said, "Amitba, I don't know. Jinrenli, please help yourself." Li Yundong saw that he had closed his eyes, as if he was seeing him off. He stood up, bowed respectfully, and left the meditation room. Li Yundong walked out of the temple thinking about the 2 golden snakes he had let go of, but he didn't see the old monk of Shiyuan Temple blame him at all, nor did he want him to be responsible for catching the 2 golden snakes. Li Yundong couldn't help but feel guilty and thought to himself, "In the future, I must catch these 2 snake demons with my own hands. Otherwise, if they do evil in the mortal world, this sin will be on my head." Li Yundong was thinking about it. When he turned a corner in the middle of the road, he suddenly saw 2 figures running into him. At this time, he was full of thoughts and didn't pay attention. He bumped into them and heard a cry, and the 2 figures fell back. Li Yundong was quick to react. He immediately grabbed one person on each side and supported them. He took a closer look and saw that it was Lu Xia, whom he had met in Tibet before, and a woman with a good appearance next to her. It was Lan Lan. As soon as Lu Xia and Lan Lan saw Li Yundong, their eyes widened. They were so guilty that they turned around and wanted to escape, especially Lan Lan. She had been clamoring to teach Li Yundong a lesson, but at this time, when she saw this ghost-like man in front of her, she immediately pulled Lu Xia and ran away with her heart beating like a drum. Li Yundong saw the 2 women run away as if they had seen a ghost. He didn't even have time to say sorry. He sighed and saw that the other party had disappeared around the corner. He shook his head and muttered, "This world is really small." Li Yundong went all the way out of Shiyuan Temple and was in a daze at the gate of the temple. After thinking for a while, he decided to start searching from a nearby place, so he returned to Shantang and kept searching back and forth. After searching like this for a few hours, Li Yundong, who had lost all hope, was about to leave. Only then did he find a very familiar figure flashing in the corner of the street not far away. The girl was about 1.65 meters tall and had a slim figure. Her black hair almost fell to her waist, and her slender waist could be held in one hand. Every time she took a step, her playful black hair would jump like an elf. As soon as Li Yundong saw this figure, his heart shook and he quickly followed her. But after the big mistake in Shiyuan Temple, he didn't dare to do it again. He just followed behind the girl for a few hundred meters until the girl stood in front of a sesame seed cake stall. She turned around and revealed a charming and beautiful face. Li Yundong's mind buzzed, and his chest felt like it was about to explode with joy. He saw that the girl was looking at the sesame seed cake stall eagerly. She wanted to eat it, but she seemed to have no money to buy it. She was drooling, and her expression was lovable. Who else could it be but Su Chan? Chapter 279. Go to watch net. Li Yundong suddenly saw Su Chan not far away from him. He was so happy that he couldn't control himself. There seemed to be a crazy voice shouting in his mind, "Little girl, this is my little girl. I will never let her leave my side again." Li Yundong only felt that he was quietly watching Su Chan from the side, and all the pores on his body were cheering and singing loudly. His whole body was filled with an indescribable joy and happiness. Watch net. 7 KOM. We haven't seen each other for so long. Should I go up and give her a warm hug? Or should he give her a passionate kiss? Or is it just a peaceful greeting? Li Yundong's mind was in turmoil. While he was hesitating, he saw the owner of the sesame seed cake stall speak to Su Chan, "One by one, I'll cut off the fake sesame seed cake one by one. It's crispy and crispy. Ah, do you want to try it?" In the face of the owner's enthusiastic greeting in Wunong's soft language, Su Chan rubbed her toes against the ground, but her eyes were fixed on the steaming sesame seed cake. She also said in Wunong's soft language, "A bundle of seasoned coins?" The boss said with a smile, "A cold one." She stood in front of the sesame seed cake stall, her eyes fixed on the sesame seed cake. She put her hand into her pocket but didn't take it out. She must be shy. Li Yundong, who was not far away, saw that Su Chan could also speak Wunong's soft language and couldn't afford to pay, so he immediately laughed. Just as he was about to step forward, he suddenly saw a young boy suddenly appear beside her and say loudly, "How many sesame seed cakes does this beauty want to buy?" "How much?" "I paid for her." Su Chan turned her head in surprise and saw a handsome boy smiling at her. Su Chan frowned and snorted coldly. "Can't I afford it?" she said in a loud voice. "You think I can't afford it? Do I need your treat?" After that, she took out 2 coins from her pocket and slapped them on the sesame seed cake stall. She took a sesame seed cake for herself and continued to walk forward. Seeing that Su Chan didn't appreciate his gesture, the boy immediately chased after her again. He smiled apologetically and said, "Hey, pretty girl, let's be friends. At least give me your contact information. Cell phone number, QQ number, if that doesn't work, MSN is fine too. Why don't you just tell me your name instead of telling me all of this?" Su Chan stopped in her tracks and yelled at him impatiently, "Aren't you annoying? You've been harassing me for a few days. I've already told you that I have a boyfriend. Stop bothering me." The boy was obviously a veteran in the field of flowers. He shamelessly smiled and said, "I've been paying attention to you for a few days, but I've never seen your boyfriend appear. Beauty, don't try to fool me with this. Look, I've even stopped my travel schedule for the past few days because of you. Isn't that very sincere? At least tell me your name. It's always good to have a few friends in this world." Su Chan covered her ears as she walked faster and faster. "You're so annoying. Go away. Go away. Then, she ran towards a small alley in Shantang Town. Shantang Town. Shantang Town. Watch net. The boy chased after her relentlessly. He chased her into an alley, turned a corner, and suddenly found that Su Chan had disappeared. The boy was shocked. He opened his eyes wide and looked around. All he saw were antique brick houses on both sides of the alley. There were no doors, and the alley was very shallow. You could see the end of it at a glance. So there was only a wall, and it was a dead end. He had no idea where Su Chan had gone. Could it be that she's actually a demon? Can she disappear into thin air? The boy scratched his head in a daze, then walked out in a daze. As soon as he walked out, he bumped into someone head-on. The boy felt as if he had hit a wall. The impact almost made him suffocate. He let out a cry and fell backward. It was Li Yundong. Li Yundong wanted to teach the guy who had harassed Su Chan a lesson, so he deliberately pretended not to notice and bumped into him. He pretended to be surprised and stared at the boy sitting on the ground. He widened his eyes but said nothing. The boy sat on the ground and glared at Li Yundong. Are you blind? He yelled. Can't you see where you're going? Li Yundong didn't know if Su Chan was nearby, but he wanted to give her a surprise. He was afraid that he would startle her if he opened his mouth, so he deliberately blinked and pretended not to hear. He pointed at his ear, then at his mouth, then at his mouth, and then at his hand. The boy crawled to his feet and cursed, "Damn it. I can't believe I ran into a mute. Hey, watch where you're going next time." Li Yundong didn't get angry. Instead, he looked at the boy with a smile. As the saying goes, don't hit a smiling face. Seeing that Li Yundong was smiling warmly, the boy didn't say anything more. He walked away, muttering to himself. But every 3 steps he took, he would look back, as if he couldn't understand why Su Chan had disappeared into thin air. Li Yundong waited until the boy's silhouette disappeared out of sight. He looked left and right. Seeing that there was no one around, he jumped up to the roof and started searching for Su Chan. It didn't take long before he found the figure of the little girl walking along the small stone bridge of Shantang 7 miles, eating the sesame seed cake in her hand as she walked. Li Yundong's cultivation could be said to have reached the great success realm, far higher than Su Chan's. He was hanging behind Su Chan, so she didn't notice him at all. She just wandered around Shantang 7 miles to kill time. Go to the internet. 7 km. As she walked, she nibbled at the sesame seed cake in her hand. She seemed to be very careful with every bite. She chewed it in her mouth for a long time before swallowing, cherishing it very much. After the little girl finished eating half of the sesame seed cake, she carefully hid the other half of the sesame seed cake in her hand. Then, she sat down on the side of the small bridge, took off her shoes, rolled up her trousers, and put her snow-white feet into the dark green river. As her feet splashed the water, her nose softly hummed an unknown tune. Li Yundong looked behind her and saw that the little girl was in this antique scenery. There was a small bridge beside her, a weak willow hanging over the river, and behind her were white walls and black tiles, flying eaves and arches. She looked like she was in a painting, and the finishing touch made the ancient scenery in front of her vivid and lively. Li Yundong looked at the little girl from a distance, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help showing a smile, which was as soft as the water grass in the river. The little girl played with the water for a while, then she bent down and picked up some water. She didn't think it was dirty. She dug some mud beside the willow tree and made a clay figurine. She was clever and dexterous. After a while, she made 2 clay figurines, one big and one small. As she played, she pointed at the small clay figurine and said to herself, "Little girl, you have to be obedient. If you don't, I won't want you." As she said this, she fiddled with the bigger clay figurine and said in a rough voice, "My little girl is the most obedient. Come on, have a bite. I'll make something delicious for you." Su Chan pouted and kissed the back of her hand. Then, she fiddled with the little clay figurine and said pitifully, "Sir, I don't have any money to spend. If you don't make something delicious for her, she will starve to death." Li Yundong's heart was filled with tenderness when he heard this. He couldn't help it anymore. He quietly walked behind the little girl and said softly, "Little girl, what do you want to eat?" Su Chan didn't react for a moment. She tilted her head and thought for a while, then said crisply, "I want to eat beer duck. The beer duck you make is the best. Well, I also want to eat cabbage and cushion carp soup. Well, I also want to eat." As she spoke, her body suddenly shook. She turned her head hard and widened her eyes. Su Chan saw an imposing, handsome boy standing behind her. He was looking at her with a smile. Who else could it be but Li Yundong? Su Chan's mouth was wide open, as if she couldn't believe her eyes. The expression on her face changed from shock to ecstasy, from ecstasy to grievance, from grievance to sadness, and finally, from sadness to surprise and worry. She was worried that what she was seeing was fake. She couldn't believe that the Li Yundong standing in front of her was real. She was afraid that this was all an illusion. Su Chan's big eyes were filled with tears. More and more tears flowed down her cheeks. After a while, like a broken string of pearls, the tears rolled down her cheeks and dripped onto the clay figurine in her hands. "Sir?" Su Chan called out tentatively. Her frightened and surprised look made it seem as if she was afraid that the Li Yundong in front of her would shatter and disappear if she spoke a little louder. Li Yundong suppressed the rolling excitement in his chest. He smiled slightly, opened his arms to the girl. "It's me, girl. Don't you recognize me?" Su Chan listened to the familiar voice that had haunted her dreams. She no longer had any doubts. She burst into tears and threw herself into Li Yundong's arms. She didn't care that her hands were dirty. She clutched Li Yundong's clothes tightly, as if she was afraid that he would run away and disappear. Su Chan cried her heart out. The lovesickness, grievance, and fear of the past all disappeared at this moment. She hugged Li Yundong tightly, as if she had someone to rely on and someone who cared about her from now on. Li Yundong lovingly stroked the girl's soft long black hair. He said softly, "Well, I'm back. I won't starve to death." Su Chan was crying loudly in Li Yundong's arms. When she heard this, she burst out laughing. She raised her head, her cheeks full of tears, but the corners of her eyes curved into crescent moons. "You're so annoying," she said. "You're the one who will starve to death." Li Yundong smiled and tapped the girl's nose. "Don't quibble. I heard it all just now. How come the little girl has no money to spend?" Su Chan blushed and said unwillingly, "You heard it all? You're so annoying. You followed me secretly and didn't tell me." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Didn't I want to give you a surprise? Girl, how can you not have money?" Thinking of this, Su Chan felt sad again, and her tears fell again. Li Yundong quickly wiped away her tears, held her face, and kissed her. He pretended to be angry and said, "If you cry again, I don't want you anymore." Su Chan quickly wiped away her tears and raised her head, as if she was trying hard to pour the tears back into her eyes. She blinked a few times and felt that she didn't want to cry anymore. Then she lowered her head and said, "My master was taken away, and I didn't dare to go to you for fear that I would affect your divine tribulation. So I had to go back to the place where my master used to live. But I don't have much money with me, so I've been hungry these days." Li Yundong was so distressed that he said, "Let's go back first. I'll make you delicious food. Where do you live?" When Su Chan heard that Li Yundong was going to make delicious food for her, she immediately put aside the sad things. She smiled and nodded vigorously. "I'll take you there." After that, she stretched out her hands and said coquettishly, "But I want to carry you." Li Yundong loved Su Chan very much. He turned around with a smile, squatted down, and said, "Come on up." Su Chan was shocked when she saw Li Yundong turn around. Oh. There are two obvious black handprints on Yundong's white shirt. Obviously, they were made by her hands that had just touched the mud. Su Chan's heart skipped a beat. She was afraid that Li Yundong would be angry when he saw them. For a moment, she quickly thought about what she should do. She put her hands behind her back and secretly rubbed them, rubbing the mud in her palms. Seeing that Su Chan didn't move, Li Yundong turned around and said with a smile, "What's wrong? You don't want to carry me? Then walk back by yourself." Su Chan said anxiously, "Of course I will." She didn't care about the black handprints on Li Yundong's body and jumped onto his back. She wrapped her arms around Li Yundong's neck, but when she saw that her hands were swaying in front of Li Yundong, she was afraid that Li Yundong would notice, so she grabbed the front of Li Yundong's shirt tightly with both hands, leaving two big black handprints on his chest. Li Yundong had no idea that he had become a clay figurine at this time. He smiled and put Su Chan on his back. "You've gained weight." Su Chan immediately twisted her body when she heard that. "Who's gained weight?" "You're the one who's gained weight. I haven't eaten for days. How can I gain weight? You lied to me." Li Yundong laughed and waved his hand. "Okay, I'm going to make delicious food for you." As he said that, he walked across the stone bridge with Su Chan on his back. One of them was as strong and handsome as a pine tree, while the other was as soft and charming as a green vine. The two figures were tightly pressed against each other. In this ancient landscape painting of a small bridge and flowing water, it was like a golden wind and jade dew meeting, surpassing countless immortal couples in the world. Li Yundong walked across the stone bridge with Su Chan on his back. He suddenly turned around and said softly, "Girl, we'll never be separated again. We'll never let go of each other again, right?" At this time, Su Chan was worried that Li Yundong would lose his temper when he saw her dirty clothes. She rolled her eyes and nodded her head like a chicken pecking rice. Her black hands grabbed Li Yundong's clothes even harder. "Yes, I won't let go even if you beat me to death." At the third watch, another 12,000 words burst forth. Chapter 280. Go to see Net. Li Yundong carried Su Chan on his back and walked to the place where she lived. He looked up and saw that it was a brick house with a red wooden door that was tightly shut. It was a house with a small courtyard that was often seen in costume dramas. Go to see Net. 7 K.O.M. Even though Su Chan was already home, she still refused to get off Li Yundong's back. "Just push the door open," she said. "You didn't lock the door?" Li Yundong asked in confusion. "Aren't you afraid of thieves?" He pushed the wooden door open and walked into the house with a squeak. There was a small vegetable garden in the yard. It was about 10 square meters. Further inside was a bungalow with 5 rooms. In the middle was the living room, where there was only a square table and 2 stools. Other than that, there was nothing else. Li Yundong walked around the living room with the girl on his back and said with a wry smile, "The thief came here for nothing. You don't even have a single electrical appliance in your house." Then he patted the girl's butt and said, "Come on down. How long do you want to stay here?" Su Chan twisted her body and said coquettishly, "I want to stay here for the rest of my life." Although she said that, she obediently climbed down. Li Yundong smiled and looked at the 2 bedrooms on the left and right. "Which is your room?" Su Chan pointed to the one on the right. "Where's the kitchen?" Li Yundong asked. Su Chan pointed to a small room next to the living room. Li Yundong nodded. He walked into the kitchen and took a look. Suddenly, he sucked in a breath of cold air. "Wow! And it's a firewood stove. This is too retro and non-mainstream." Li Yundong looked around with a wry smile. There were carrots, sweet potatoes, corn, and other vegetables in the room that were not easy to spoil. He smiled. "You have some food here. Why don't you make your own food? You'd rather starve my girl. Be careful, or I'll punish you. Su Chan took Li Yundong's hand and said coquettishly, You told me not to cook. Only then did Li Yundong remember that he had once told the little girl not to cook when she was alone. He couldn't help laughing. That also depends on the situation. Otherwise, will you starve to death? Su Chan giggled. I knew you would come to save me. You wouldn't let me starve to death. Li Yundong scratched the little girl's nose with a smile and said, Is there a place selling vegetables nearby? Su Chan thought for a moment and said, Yes, but it will take a while. Li Yundong smiled and said, Then I'll go buy some vegetables. Will you wait for me here? Su Chan clung to his arm tightly. No, I want to go with you, she said, refusing to budge. Li Yundong didn't want to be separated from the girl for even a second, so he smiled and said, Okay, let's go together. With that, the two of them didn't even lock the door. They just closed it a little and went out again. Li Yundong and Su Chan walked on the street like a conjoined body. Along the way, many people looked at them in surprise, especially many people who glanced at the two black handprints in front of Li Yundong, secretly covering their mouths and laughing. Li Yundong thought they were laughing because of Su Chan's cute appearance, so he didn't take it seriously. Su Chan, on the other hand, had a guilty conscience. When she saw the people in front of her, she had an idea. She went around to Li Yundong's front to block everyone's view. When they turned around to the back, she went around to Li Yundong's back to block their view. She was busy spinning around Li Yundong like a spinning top. Li Yundong saw her running around like a busy bee, so he smiled and said, What are you running around for? My eyes are dazzled by you. Su Chan giggled and said, Nothing. Li Yundong saw that all the tourists in Shantang were looking at him. He couldn't help but ask curiously, Why are they looking at me? Is there something on my face? Su Chan was shocked, but she smiled dryly and said, Nothing, nothing. You're the most handsome man. How could there be flowers? Saying this, she urged Li Yundong to hurry up and said, I'm starving. Let's go buy some food. Li Yundong didn't suspect anything. He smiled and went to a nearby small market with Su Chan, bought some food, and then prepared to go home. On the way home, they suddenly met the boy who had been pestering Su Chan before. Li Yundong glanced at him faintly and didn't say anything. He walked over with Su Chan, who deliberately held Li Yundong's arm tightly to show off and made a face at the boy. The boy stared blankly at Su Chan and Li Yundong as they left. He was so angry that smoke was coming out of his nostrils. Damn it. All the good cabbages have been taken by pigs. Is this beauty blind? How could she be with a mute? This mute was still wearing such dirty clothes. Damn it, what kind of world is this? She doesn't even want to be with a handsome, rich man like me, and run away to be with such a thing. Is there any justice in this world? Is there any law in this world? Li Yundong didn't know that someone was criticizing him behind his back. He took Su Chan back to the place where he lived. He quickly made 2 dishes and a soup in the kitchen, and then brought them to the square table. The two of them sat facing each other. Su Chan held the hot rice bowl in her hand and looked at the steaming soup in front of her. For a moment, she felt warm in her heart. She stretched her head and opened her mouth, smiling. I want you to feed me soup, she said. Li Yundong smiled and scooped up a spoonful of soup. He blew on it, then moved closer to Su Chan's mouth and said, Okay, okay. I'll feed you like this for the rest of your life. Su Chan looked at Li Yundong in a daze. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt sad, and tears fell from her eyes again, dripping into the soup spoon. Li Yundong smiled. Why are you crying again? Are you thinking about your master again? Don't worry, I will definitely help you find her. Su Chan shook her head and wiped away her tears. No, I believe you can find her. I am just too happy. Li Yundong smiled and said, drink the soup while it's hot. Su Chan stuck out her bright red tongue and licked it. She smacked her lips and said, it's salty. You put too much salt in it. Li Yundong pretended to be angry and said, nonsense. It's clear that your tears just now made the soup salty. Su Chan giggled, opened her mouth, and swallowed the spoon in one gulp. When she opened her mouth again, she said with a smile, it's sweet. Li Yundong saw that she was obviously talking nonsense, so he immediately laughed. He also opened his mouth, stood up, leaned his upper body forward slightly, and said, I've fed you. It's your turn to feed me. Su Chan also took a spoonful of soup and stood up to feed it to Li Yundong. But as soon as the soup reached Li Yundong's mouth, her eyes fell on the two dazzling black handprints in front of Li Yundong's body. Her heart trembled, and her hand tilted, causing the soup to spill towards Li Yundong's mouth. Li Yundong curled his mouth and wanted to catch it, but it still spilled all over his body. He quickly stood up and lowered his head to pat the soup off his body. But as soon as he lowered his head, he suddenly took a deep breath. Oh my God, I've been hit by the Tantric Mahamudra. Li Yundong didn't even need to think to know that it must be the work of the little girl. He raised his head helplessly and said with a drawl, Su Chan. Seeing that she couldn't hide it any longer, the little girl walked over with her head down. She grabbed the corner of her clothes and said pitifully, I'm sorry. I was too excited just now, so I dirtied your clothes. It's no big deal. I'll wash them for you. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing when he saw the little girl's pitiful appearance. He pinched her nose with his hand and said, let's eat first. Su Chan was delighted and raised her head. Don't you need me to wash them? Li Yundong scolded with a smile, only after eating will you have the strength to wash them. Su Chan's face suddenly fell. Oh. She obediently sat down at the table and began to eat. At first, she wolfed down her food. Li Yundong really couldn't stand it anymore, so he tapped Su Chan's bowl with his chopsticks and scolded her with a smile. Are you a reincarnated hungry ghost? Eat slowly, chew carefully, and swallow slowly. You're a cultivator. Su Chan nodded again and said dryly, you sound like my master. Li Yundong smiled and said, really? Whether it's from the point of view of you being my girlfriend or from the point of view of the Fox Zen school, you should listen to me. Su Chan blinked in confusion. Why do you say that? Li Yundong smiled and said, because I'm now the leader of the Fox Zen school. Su Chan was stunned. Her cherry mouth opened wider and wider, forming an O shape. She said, Yundong, you're not kidding, are you? Li Yundong said with a smile, of course not. You eat first. After eating and washing the clothes, I'll tell you slowly. Su Chan was so curious that she couldn't wait to finish eating immediately. She took another big bite. Li Yundong immediately tapped her bowl with his chopsticks and shouted, eat slowly. Only then did Su Chan start to chew slowly like a lady. After she finished eating, she cleverly cleaned up the bowls on the table. Li Yundong had nothing to do, so he walked to Su Chan's room. There was only a mahogany table and an antique mahogany bed in the room. The bed was covered with soft bedding, and there were writing brushes, ink, paper, and inkstones on the table. Li Yundong walked to the table and saw a stack of rice paper under the paperweight. There was a line of small seal characters written on the rice paper. Li Yundong picked it up and looked at it. He suddenly smiled and recited loudly, fine clouds play tricks, flying stars pass hate, silver river passes in the dark. When the golden wind and jade do meet, it is better than countless things in the world. Tenderness is like water, a good night is like a dream, forgetting the magpie bridge to return home. If two people love each other for a long time, why do they sleep on the bed? After he finished reciting, he laughed loudly and picked up the brush next to him. He added, fine clouds play tricks, flying stars pass hate, silver river passes in the dark. When the golden wind and jade do meet, it is better than adultery. Tenderness is like water, a good night is like a dream, forgetting the Magpie Bridge to return home. If two people love each other for a long time, why do they sleep on the bed? This is how it should be. Li Yundong amused himself by ruining Qingguan's, the immortal at the Magpie Bridge. He turned to the next page and saw that it was Yuan Haowen's famous line. He read, "What is love in the world?" Before he could finish reading, Su Chan rushed into the room and threw herself at him, blushing. She grabbed the piece of paper in his hand and yelled, "Don't read it. Give it to me. Give it to me. Give it to me." Li Yundong laughed until she snatched the poem manuscript away. Su Chan's face turned red from Li Yundong's laughter. She was so embarrassed that she stamped her feet and said angrily, "Don't read it. Give it to me. Give it to me. How dare you laugh?" Li Yundong tried hard to hold back his laughter and said, Okay, I won't laugh. Hurry up and wash my clothes." Su Chan blushed and reached out her hand. "Take off your clothes." Li Yundong took off his clothes. As he did so, he shook his head and recited, "Ask the world, what is love? It makes people want to take off their pants." After that, he handed the clothes to Su Chan with a straight face and asked, "Do you want me to take off my pants?" Su Chan giggled, but her face quickly turned serious again. She snatched his shirt and pounced on him. "I want you to take it off. I want you to take it off. I'll bite you to death." Li Yundong laughed out loud. She pounced on him and he fell backwards onto the mahogany bed behind him. The two of them rolled around in a ball, laughing and playing for a while. Li Yundong felt like he was hugging a beautiful woman. Su Chan's delicate face was right in front of him, within reach. Her bright red lips were delicate and tender, like jelly strawberries. Without thinking, he lowered his head and kissed her. But just as he was about to kiss her, he suddenly heard a series of knocks on the door. "Is anyone home? Is anyone home? //7854627895541." Chapter 281. Go to watch net. As soon as Li Yundong heard the voice, he jumped up from the bed angrily and said, "Which B**** is disturbing me at this time? Someone, drag him out and shoot him for 5 minutes." Su Chan giggled on the bed and said, "This is called God has eyes. God won't let you do bad things." Li Yundong pretended to be angry and said, "B****, I'm your leader. How dare you not speak up for me? I'll take off my clothes and pants." Su Chan laughed so hard that she rolled on the bed like a gourd. "You've already taken off your clothes. Do you want to take off your pants again? Be careful that others see you like this. They'll laugh at the leader of the Fox Zen school for not being decent." Li Yundong raised his head and laughed. "Apart from the cultivation world, who knows that I'm the leader of the Fox Zen school?" While the two of them were whispering to each other, they heard the knocking on the door getting louder and louder. A woman shouted, "Is there anyone here?" Li Yundong winked at Su Chan and gestured at himself. "Hey, do you want the leader of the Fox Zen school to go out to meet the guests with his shirt off? Hurry up and get a set of clothes." Su Chan looked embarrassed. "But we don't have men's clothes here. Go to watch net. 7KOM. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "Then give me those dirty clothes. I'll make do with them." Su Chan suddenly thought of something and ran into Ao Wushuang's room. After a while, she took out a set of clothes and brought them to Li Yundong. Li Yundong looked at it and was immediately amused. He saw that it was a large Taoist robe. Li Yunyang took it and put it on. It fit him well. He immediately bowed his head and said seriously, "Amateus, fellow Taoist, please lead the way." Su Chan giggled and returned the salute seriously. "Yes, leader." The two of them looked at each other and smiled, then wanted to go outside. When Li Yundong walked outside, he saw a woman dressed in branded clothes and knocking on the brass ring on the door impatiently. "Hello, how can I help you?" Li Yundong asked politely. The woman was about 40 years old and had heavy makeup on her face. She was carrying a small bag in her hand. As soon as she saw Li Yundong, she was stunned and secretly cheered in her heart. What a handsome and heroic Taoist. It's a pity that he has become a monk. Seeing that Li Yundong was extraordinary and handsome, her previous anger dissipated a little. She lowered her voice and said, "I'm looking for Miss Ning Wushuang." Ning Wushuang? Li Yundong was stunned. Su Chan reacted quickly and whispered in his ear, "It's my master." Her original name was Ning Wushuang, and later she changed her name to Ao Wushuang. Li Yundong reacted and smiled. "Ning Wushuang isn't here right now. You can tell me if there's anything." The woman looked him up and down from head to toe. "You can make decisions? Who are you to her?" When Su Chan saw the doubt in her eyes, she said loudly, "This is our sect leader. Ning Wushuang is my master." She has to bow and greet the sect leader. Leader? The expression on the middle-aged woman's face suddenly became very strange. She thought to herself, could he be the leader in the costume drama? Li Yundong chuckled and said, "If you have anything to say, you can tell me. I can more or less make some decisions." The middle-aged woman saw that Li Yundong was calm and composed when he spoke. Although he looked young, he had a temperament like a pine tree when he stood there. He was extraordinary, like a deep pool and a high mountain. He was indeed like a leader who was used to storms and could control the situation. The middle-aged woman retracted her contemptuous and suspicious gaze. She nodded, took out a contract with a few pages from the small bag in her hand, and said, "Then I'll be straightforward. 2 years ago, Ning Wushuang rented this house from me for 2 years. Today is exactly 2 years. I wanted to call Miss Ning Wushuang, but unfortunately, I couldn't get in touch with her, so I had to come here." Li Yundong muttered in his heart, "Is there such a coincidence? The contract is up today? She just happened to come here when I was making out with that girl?" The middle-aged woman handed the contract over and said, "Take a look at it yourself." Li Yundong took the contract and glanced at it. Sure enough, it was today. He smiled bitterly in his heart, but he still said politely, "You came today to ask if we would like to renew the contract, right?" The middle-aged woman nodded and said, "Yes, if we renew the contract, the rent may be raised a little. You know, everything has been rising recently, and this place is in a prime location, so you know." Li Yundong looked at Su Chan and asked her with his eyes, which meant, "Do you want to renew the contract for your master?" Before Su Chan could speak, she heard a boy next to her say loudly, "I'll rent it, I'll rent it." Li Yundong and Su Chan turned their heads and saw that it was the boy who had pestered Su Chan before. They didn't know which corner he had come out from, but they didn't know where he had come from. Li Yundong and Su Chan looked at each other, then at each other. Su Chan whispered, "Yundong, this guy is so annoying. He's been following me like sticky candy for several days." Li Yundong smiled and whispered to her, "It's okay. It's not like I haven't met this kind of rich guy before." After that, he winked at her. Su Chan burst into laughter. She remembered the scene when Li Yundong teased Lu Chuan, so she calmed down and waited for the show to start. The boy saw that Li Yundong and Su Chan were so intimate and didn't take him seriously at all. He became more and more jealous. He said rudely to Li Yundong, "Hey, aren't you mute?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "When did I say that I was mute?" The boy said angrily, "Then why didn't you speak at that time?" If Li Yundong continued to provoke him, the guy might give up. He shook his head and deliberately pretended to sigh. He said to Su Chan, "I'm sorry, I don't have that much money. I can't rent it." Su Chan was clever and clever. She said with a sad face, "Then what should we do?" The boy snorted and sneered. "Dude, don't pick up girls if you don't have money these days. Su Chan made a face at him and said, Bah, you haven't rented it yet. What are you so proud of? The boy sneered and took out a checkbook from his arms. He quickly wrote a string of numbers, signed his name, and waved it in front of the middle-aged woman. Where's the contract? The middle-aged woman hadn't expected that the two boys' jealousy would benefit her. The rent of the house had been 150,000 yuan a year, but it had been raised to 1 million. She was so happy that her eyes were about to disappear. She quickly took out a folded contract from her bag and signed it, fearing that the boy would go back on his word. After the boy signed the contract, he laughed and said, This place is mine from now on. Hey, beauty, if you want to live here, I have no problem with it, but as for you. As he said this, he looked Li Yundong up and down and said disdainfully, Forget it. I don't welcome you. Li Yundong deliberately sighed and said, Girl, I've been driven away. What are you going to do? Su Chan smiled without hesitation and said, Of course I'll go with my master. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, Well, we don't have much luggage anyway. Let's go. Then he took Su Chan's hand and started to walk away. The boy next to her was dumbfounded. He stopped Su Chan and asked, Hey, beauty, you don't live here? Su Chan blinked at him strangely. I used to live here, but not now. You can live here, the boy said anxiously. I have no problem with it. Su Chan waved at him and said crisply, You're such a strange person. Of course I'll go with my boyfriend. Wherever he goes, I'll go. Even if he has to live on the streets, I'll follow him. But you're blind. My boyfriend is a great man, and you actually showed off in front of him. You're like a mayfly trying to shake a tree. Ridiculous. Forget it, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm leaving. Don't follow me anymore, or I'll make you pay. After that, she shook her fist at him and made a face at him. Li Yundong tried to hold back his laughter and sighed deliberately. Alas, it's not good for people to be too charming. Even if they're poor and have nothing, there are still beautiful women willing to follow them. Don't you think so, girl? Su Chan looked up with a smile and said sweetly, Yes, master. After that, Li Yundong laughed and waved his hand. Let's go. We're going to live on the streets. Su Chan giggled and wrapped her arms around Li Yundong's arm. She followed him step by step, her face full of happiness and sweetness. The boy was dumbfounded. His eyes stared straight ahead and he said, Are these two retarded? Is there something wrong with this beauty's brain? She looks so beautiful. What's wrong with her brain? The middle-aged woman put away the contract and said, There's nothing wrong with their brains. I've seen countless people, but I've never seen such a dignified and elegant boy. Look at how miserable he is. Hey, he must be a great man. I think you've made a mistake. The boy immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. He tore the contract in his hand frantically, grabbed the middle-aged woman's collar, and roared, Give me back my check. I don't want to rent it anymore. Although the middle-aged woman was threatened, she was still calm. She sneered and said, The contract has been signed in duplicate. It's written in black and white. Do you still want to deny it? The boy grinned hideously and said, Bitch, don't think that I'm easy to bully. Go and find out my name. How dare you cheat me of my money? Are you tired of living? The middle-aged woman didn't react for a moment and said loudly, Both of us were willing. I didn't cheat you. Shin Yu slapped her and said, If I say you're lying, then you're lying. You're playing tricks on me. You're tired of living. Why don't you go and find out my name? After being slapped, the middle-aged woman suddenly reacted. She covered her face, her eyes flashing with hatred, but she asked, Who is Shen Wankai in Tiannan City to you? Shin Yu snorted and said, He's my father. What's wrong? Are you afraid? The middle-aged woman took a deep breath, forced a smile, and said, So it's the young master of the Shen family. Why didn't you say so earlier? She took out the check from her bag and handed it back. Then, she tore the contract in her hand and said with a smile, "It's really a flood against the Temple of the Dragon King. Wouldn't it have been fine if you had said so earlier?" Shin Yu looked at her coldly and took the check. "At least you know what's good for you. Hey, let me ask you, do you know the name of that woman just now?" The middle-aged woman shook her head and said, "I don't know." Shin Yu scolded, "Your landlord doesn't know the name of the tenant? Are you kidding me? No wonder you're still doing such a small business at such an old age. You deserve it." He turned his head in the direction of their departure and spat fiercely. "I'll find you sooner or later." After that, he walked away quickly. The middle-aged woman waited for him to walk away before showing a fierce look in her eyes. She spat fiercely and said, "Bah, you want to fight with him? You're not even as good as a hair on his head. Who do you think you are? You're so arrogant because of your father. Sooner or later, you'll get your retribution." Li Yundong didn't know that so many things had happened after he left. After walking for a while with Su Chan, she looked up at him and asked, "Yundong, where are we going?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Of course we're going back to the Fox Zen school. I'll tell you what happened on the way." Su Chan smiled happily and said, Okay, but I want to carry you on my back." As she spoke, she jumped onto Li Yundong's back. Li Yundong smiled lovingly and said, "You want me to carry you to Mount Tianlong?" Su Chan giggled and said, "I want you to carry me for the rest of your life. Will you?" Li Yundong smiled and said, Okay, I'll carry you." The two of them talked and laughed, and their backs stretched out on the street, as if they were one person, //7854627895541. Chapter 282. Go to watch net. Dongwu City was not far from Mount Tianlong, but Li Yundong walked all the way with Su Chan on his back. As they walked, they talked about recent things. The two of them were so intimate that they refused to let go of each other for even a second. They walked until it was dark before they reached the foot of the mountain. Watch net. Su Chan listened to Li Yundong talk about how he had reached the Zhuji phase, how he had cultivated his Shintong, and how he had passed the divine tribulation. When she heard the tense parts, Su Chan couldn't help but widen her eyes and hold her breath. Especially when Li Yundong said that as soon as he had reached the Zhuji phase, he had met Wu Hao and LV Fengping of the Yin Yang sect of Mount Wuhua, who had tried to snatch the fan of 7 treasures. Su Chan was so angry that she shouted, "Damn it! They should be killed. How dare they bully the few and rob the fan of 7 treasures?" Li Yundong chuckled and continued to talk about how he had passed the heavenly tribulation. Su Chan sighed and said, "Jinren Zi Yuan must have put in a lot of effort to help you pass the heavenly tribulation. It's a pity that Master was captured at that time. Otherwise, she would have come to help you cross the heavenly tribulation." Li Yundong also sighed and nodded. "Yes, I owe her too much. I'll find a chance to repay her in the future." Then he talked about how he had defeated the masters of various sects in the Fox Zen school of Mount Tianlong. The thrilling and exciting part of it made the little girl's eyes widen, as if she had been there herself. Su Chan waited for Li Yundong to finish speaking. In the end, he had defeated Zi Yuan and all the sects had retreated. She looked at Li Yundong with admiration and sighed, "Yundong, when you hadn't officially cultivated, I thought that you would definitely become a great hero in the future. Now it seems that I was right." Li Yundong turned around with a smile and pinched the little girl's nose. "Yes, it's mainly because my little girl has a good eye for heroes. That's why I, a little boy, can change from a useless otaku to the current leader of the Fox Zen school." Su Chan giggled, her expression full of pride. She suddenly asked, "Yundong, do you think Jinren Zi Yuan deliberately let you win in the end?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "It's possible. Zi Yuan's cultivation is not only profound but also extensive. I was very afraid of her magic cultivation and wanted to decide the outcome of the battle by close combat, but I didn't expect that she was also very good at martial arts. Her 8 trigrams palm was extremely wonderful. Su Chan smiled and said, haven't you heard of the 10 Daos, 9 doctors, and the 10 Daos, 9 martial arts? Which cultivator did not know how to treat illnesses? Which cultivator did not know martial arts? The only difference was that there was a difference in strength. For an inner disciple like Daoist Zi Yuan, she had been nourished by medicinal pills since she was in her mother's womb. When she was born, she was bathed in medicinal water and began to practice martial arts at the age of 5. Watch net. Li Yundong nodded and said, now that I think about my duel with Zhang Tianhe, I also feel that there was a lot of luck involved. If I were to fight him again, it's hard to say who would win. Su Chan lay on Li Yundong's shoulder and said shyly, Yundong, you are now the leader of our Fox Zen school. What will you do in the future? When are you going to look for my master? Li Yundong pondered for a while and said, I think your master's matter will probably fall on Zi Yuan in the end. After all, she is Yen Feng Shiji. Let's see if Zi Yuan can be a peacemaker. Su Chan was lost in thought when she heard this. She said, I really didn't expect that master, Wang Yuanshan, the leader of the Linggong sect, and Yen Feng, Wang Yuanshan's shimi, would have such a complicated relationship. Yen Feng is too tolerant and vicious. She actually sneaked into our Fox Zen school as a spy for nearly 9 years and plotted to destroy our Fox Zen school. Such scheming and means are too terrifying. Li Yundong also sighed and said, love, this word, can make people obsessed and crazy. Yen Feng has already walked the devil's path. I hope she will turn back as soon as possible. Alas, I wonder how Zi Yuan is doing now. The two of them talked and walked. They had already walked halfway up the mountain and were about to see the gate of the Fox Zen school. Li Yundong patted Su Chan's buttocks and said, come down. You are about to enter the Taoist school. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at? Su Chan giggled. I'm not afraid. But she obediently climbed down. She looked around, sniffed, and said, there's a strong smell of blood here. Li Yundong sighed and said, the major sects fought and killed a lot of people. Many people of the Fox Zen school died, and many people of the major sects also died. At this time, Su Chan suddenly tilted her head and said, I seem to hear someone singing an opera. Li Yundong was stunned. Opera? Don't joke around. It's 1 or 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. Who would be singing in the mountains? Could it be that the ghosts of the dead are still lingering around? You can't scare me. Su Chan smiled and said, that's right. You are now a famous figure in the cultivation world. Why would you be afraid of these ghosts? But I did hear someone singing an opera. Foxes were born with sharp 5 senses, far better than humans. Li Yundong listened attentively and heard a faint sound of opera coming from the distance. Go to see the net. 7 K.O. Li Yundong had a strange look on his face. What's going on? He and Su Chan looked at each other and said, let's go and have a look. The two of them ran all the way. When they arrived at the gate of the Taoist temple, they directly flew in without pushing the door open. As soon as they entered, Li Yundong heard the sound of an opera. A woman was singing an opera. Li Yundong couldn't hear the lyrics clearly, but he could vaguely tell that it was quite lively. Li Yundong felt more and more strange. He didn't know what had happened to the Fox Zen school. He made a silent gesture to Su Chan, and the two of them hid in the darkness, holding their breath and quietly moving forward. They went all the way to the lobby of the Taoist temple and saw that a stage had been set up in the Yinyang Taoist field, where Li Yundong had fought against the heroes before. On the stage, a woman in costume was singing. Below the stage, a group of people were playing jinghu, eru, banhu, jubin, bowls, and drums. Li Yundong looked over and felt that the woman singing on the stage was a little familiar. He couldn't help asking in a low voice in surprise, "Who is this woman? Why does she look a little familiar?" Su Chan's eyes widened as she said, "Isn't that my sixth Shibwa, Chao Yi?" Li Yundong was shocked. In his impression, Chao Yi, the sixth Shibwa of the Fox Zen school, was dignified and steady. She was a person who could be entrusted with important things, but at this time, the sect had suddenly changed. How could she put on a costume and sing? This is too funny, isn't it? Li Yundong saw that the beautiful and dignified sixth Shibwa, Chao Yi, was walking on the stage as smoothly as water, and her sleeves were like clouds and mist. She had a profound foundation. Even if she was not a professional, she was still a veteran fan. Chao Yi waved her sleeves on the stage and covered her face with them. She sighed and sang, "Crying husband, you are a short-lived ghost. You don't know how to cheat others, but you do know how to cheat your wife. We have the heart to protect your little girl, but there is no one in your family who can do anything. The mother-in-law is always looking for trouble, and the sister-in-law likes to scold people. The old man is 60 years old this year. I eat oranges, and he peels them for me. I thought to myself that there was nothing else to do at such an old age, but I never thought that he would be born with no future. If it weren't for the fact that we knew, my enemy. Ah! You would have been cuckolded after you died." This part of the opera was sung with a long and clear voice. Li Yundong could hear it clearly. He suddenly took a deep breath and the corners of his eyes twitched. He said, Isn't this the little widow visits the grave? Why is she singing this play at this time? This is too unreliable." Su Chan pointed to the troupe below the stage and suddenly said, "Ah, isn't that my third Shibwa Zhuang Yiting, fourth Shibwa Zhang Sun Hong, and fifth Shibwa Lu Yuehong?" Li Yundong looked over and saw a few women in Taoist robes sitting in the troupe. They were Zhuang Yiting, Zhang Sun Hong, and Lu Yuehong. One of them was playing the jinghu, one was beating the clapboard, and the other was beating the drum. When they saw Chao Yi singing the best part, they even cheered and shook their heads, looking very intoxicated. At this time, Li Yundong's mind was completely in a mess. He said, What the hell is going on?" He was in a daze when he saw that Chao Yi had already finished singing. There was a burst of cheers and applause below the stage. A young disciple of the Fox Zen school said loudly, "Sixth Shibwa, your singing is getting better and better." On the stage, Chao Yi covered her face with her sleeves and smiled, flirting with the female disciples below the stage. Her eyes narrowed, she pointed softly and said coquettishly, "You devil." There was a burst of laughter below the stage. Li Yundong almost fainted when he saw this scene. Just as he was about to go out and ask what was going on, he saw third Shibwa Zhuang Yiting stand up and say, "Let's stop here. It's time to burn paper money for master." She was quite tall, about 1.78 meters. Her voice was neutral, and her words were convincing. After Zhuang Yiting finished speaking, the people below the stage immediately agreed. They took off their costumes one after another, put on their Taoist robes, and came to the side of the stage. Only then did Li Yundong notice that there was a simple spiritual platform next to the stage. In the middle of the spiritual platform, there was a photo of Lu Yi, the leader of the sect. Under the photo was a coffin with gold threads, and on both sides of the coffin were two large iron buckets. After Chao Yi changed into her Taoist robe, she took all the Shiji, Shimi, and disciples to the front of the spiritual platform and knelt down neatly. Several senior disciples knelt in the middle and threw the paper money into the sky. Then, all the disciples began to cry loudly. For a moment, the sound of crying was really loud in the Fox Zen school. It was heart-wrenching, and even the little girl's eyes were a little red. After crying for a long time, the paper money was burned out, and Chao Yi said loudly, "Stop." The crying of this group of disciples suddenly stopped. The disciples who had been crying and rolling on the ground immediately got up and returned to the stage. They picked up their musical instruments, and a curious disciple asked, "Hey, what's the next performance?" The disciple who had been asked rolled his eyes and said, "Nonsense, there's no need to ask. We'll watch the door later." After a while, the troop was ready again, and all the disciples of the Fox Zen school took their places. Li Yundong was amazed when he saw them crying and stopping as they pleased. They were even more professional than professional mourners. Just as he was stunned, he saw the door creaking again. This time, it was not Chao Yi who was singing, but fifth Shibo Lu Yuehong. Chao Yi sat down and played the small drum seriously. Li Yundong's eyes widened as he saw Lu Yuehong singing. "I got angry as I talked." The water caltrop fell on the flat slope. After breaking the mirror frame was broken. The oil and powder on my head were splashed down. "I can't beat you, so I won't. Second sister, I'm going to do something upstairs." At the end of the song, the people below the stage suddenly joined in and sang, "Do something, hey, hey." Li Yundong suddenly took 3 steps back and almost fainted on the spot. Fortunately, Su Chan supported him, so he didn't fall to the ground. Seeing that Li Yundong had lost his composure, Su Chan couldn't help asking, "What are they singing?" The corners of Li Yundong's eyes twitched and he stammered, "Wang, Sister Wang misses her husband, //7854627895541. Chapter 283. Go to watch net. Although Su Chan was inexperienced, she could tell what the play, Wang Erji misses her husband, was just by hearing the name. She immediately said with her eyes wide open, "Grandmaster just died. How could they sing this play? This is too reckless, isn't it?" Li Yundong took a deep breath. He was already a little unhappy in his heart. No matter what, the Fox Zen school had suddenly undergone a great change. It was fine that these guys didn't observe filial piety, but they actually sang such a vulgar song. It was really hateful. Li Yundong's face darkened and he coughed. His voice was not loud, but it was clearly heard by the disciples of the Fox Zen school. Go to watch net. Chao Yi was the most powerful among these people. She immediately shouted in a low voice, "Who is it?" She threw away the things in her hand and jumped in the direction of the voice. Just as she was about to make a move, she suddenly saw Li Yundong looking at her in the darkness. Chao Yi was shocked and immediately stopped. She bowed respectfully and said, "Leader." Then she nodded to Su Chan, who was beside Li Yundong, with a smile. Li Yundong nodded to her with a sullen face, while Su Chan bowed respectfully to Chao Yi. After returning the greeting, Chao Yi turned around and said to the other disciples who were about to rush over, "Don't worry, the leader is back." When the disciples of the Fox Zen school heard that the new leader had returned, they all breathed a sigh of relief and came up to greet Li Yundong. After returning the greetings one by one, Li Yundong waved to them and said, "You guys go ahead. Chao Yi, stay here for a moment. I have something to ask you." Chao Yi nodded. After instructing the other disciples to leave, she said respectfully to Li Yundong, "Leader, what can I do for you?" Li Yundong asked in a deep voice, "I didn't want to get involved at first. Moreover, I just took over as the leader of the Fox Zen school, so it can be said that I don't know anything. If it weren't for your repeated requests, I wouldn't have become the leader of the Fox Zen school. But now that I'm the leader, I want to ask, why do you sing such a play in public when the Fox Zen school has suddenly undergone a great change and the former leader has just passed away? Don't you think it's inappropriate?" Chao Yi saw that Li Yundong's face had been sullen and his eyes were unkind, so she felt a little uneasy. Although Li Yundong was young, he had single-handedly fought against the powerful enemies of all the major sections. All the people of the Fox Zen school had seen this, and they all respected and feared him. Therefore, when Li Yundong pulled a long face, although Chao Yi was older, she felt that this young leader had a dignified aura, which made her feel uneasy and fearful. Watch net. Hearing Li Yundong's words, she immediately breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Leader, you don't know. For us cultivators, death is like an extinguished lamp. Once our corporeal body is destroyed, we just need to find a place to bury it. In fact, we don't really care about these funeral matters. It's just that the former sect leader once told us that if he died, we should do as the Romans do and watch over his spirit for a night and sing opera for him." Li Yundong frowned and said, "There's no need to sing, the little widow visits the grave and Wang Erji misses her husband." Chao Yi laughed dryly and said, "But the former leader loved this kind of drama the most." Li Yundong suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air and thought to himself, "If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "So that's how it is. I was wrong about you. However, you have just experienced a fierce battle. Everyone, go back to rest." Chao Yi smiled and said, "The sect leader sympathizes with us, so we should respect him. However, the former sect leader gave us an order first. Please forgive us for not respecting him. After all, Master's life is as important as a mountain. I hope the sect leader can understand." Li Yundong sighed and said, "Well, but you should also change to something else. Don't always sing this kind of drama. If it gets out, it will have a bad influence." Chao Yi smiled bitterly and said, "Our Fox Zen school is a hidden sect. Except for Shimi Wushuang, no one else has ever left the mountain. We grew up here, and everything was taught by the sect leader Shibua, including these plays. We know as many as he teaches us." Li Yundong couldn't help interrupting her. "You mean, apart from these plays, you don't know anything else?" Chao Yi nodded vigorously. Li Yundong couldn't help but press his throbbing temples with his hand. With a defeated expression on his face, he said with a wry smile, "Forget it, don't sing anymore. Anyway, you have already sung before. You can keep vigil and do something else to replace it. What else did the former sect leader like to do when he was alive? You can help him do it." Chao Yi thought for a moment and said, "Okay." After that, she turned around and said loudly, "Attention, everyone. The sect leader said that we don't need to sing anymore. Let's do what the former sect leader liked to do when he was alive. It can be considered as helping him keep vigil." The disciples of the Fox Zen school roared in agreement. They quickly dismantled the stage, and then carried out many tables and chairs from the Taoist temple and placed them in front of the altar. Li Yundong was dumbfounded as he watched them set up tables and chairs, and then spread the wide tablecloth on the table. 2 disciples carried 4 suitcases and put them on the table. Then, the group of people began to build the Great Wall in high spirits. "Go to see?" Li Yundong asked, "What are they doing?" Chao Yi blinked her eyes and said, "Playing mahjong." The former sect leader liked playing mahjong best. Li Yundong almost fainted. He groaned, covered his eyes with his hand, waved his hand, and said, "Forget it, I can't control you. You can do whatever you want." Chao Yi nodded and was about to turn around to leave when Li Yundong remembered the trouble he had caused in Shiyuan Temple. He said, "By the way, does the Fox Zen school have any liquid funds now?" Unexpectedly, as soon as Li Yundong mentioned this, Chao Yi immediately poured out her grievances and said, "Oh, sect leader, you've hit the nail on the head. The money of our sect has always been managed by the sect leader. The former sect leader Lu Yi took all the money, but we don't have a penny with us. Let's not talk about other things. Look at this scene. In addition to our own sect's people, there are also some temporarily hired actors from outside, and this stage and platform are all temporarily rented with borrowed money. We haven't paid for them yet." Li Yundong was shocked. There are actors on this mountain who can perform as guests? And things like the stage and the altar can be rented?" Chao Yi looked at Li Yundong with a puzzled expression and said, "Mount Tianlong is a tourist attraction. There are many shops nearby, and many of them are Taoist rites. These guys usually act as monks and Taoists when they have nothing to do. Occasionally, they also act as actors." As Chao Yi spoke, she began to complain again. Oh, sect leader, you don't know how black-hearted these guys are. They charge 500 yuan for the altar and the stage for one night. Isn't this daylight robbery? We usually see them all the time, but they are so black-hearted. How can we have this kind of money? Li Yundong was dumbfounded when he heard this. What's going on? I wanted to ask them for money, but in the end, I was the one who asked for it. Isn't this too exaggerated? Chao Yi acted as if she hadn't seen Li Yundong's expression. She sighed and said, everyone in the Fox Zen school is counting on you now. Don't say anything else, at least pay for the stage and the altar. Li Yundong subconsciously touched his pocket and took out a small stack of red notes. He was afraid of being poor and always carried them with him for self-defense. He thought to himself, after all, I'm the leader of the Fox Zen school, so I can't be too stingy. Anyway, I don't have much money, so I'll just pay it first and get it back later. Chao Yi was overjoyed to take the money. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, she suddenly thought of something. She turned around and said, by the way, sect leader, you might as well go to the room of the former sect leader, Lu Yi. All the money of our Fox Zen school is kept by him. He usually keeps a list in his bookshelf. Sect leader, you'll know when you see it. Only then did Li Yundong feel relieved. He thought to himself, fortunately, there are assets left behind. Otherwise, on the first day of this inexplicable sect leader, would have lost a lot of money. That would have been very depressing. Not to mention anything else, if I were to support more than a dozen people, I would be poor. Li Yundong waved his hand at Chao Yi and said, I see. You go ahead. I'll go to the study of the former sect leader myself. Chao Yi turned around and left with a smile. As soon as she walked into the Taoist field, she saw the other disciples of the sect shouting at her, Chao Yi Shibua, come here quickly. We need one more. Chao Yi immediately ran over excitedly, sat down, and began to build the Great Wall with great proficiency. After grabbing a few cards, she laughed loudly, pushed the cards, and shouted, draw yourself, 3 yuan, mix 1 color. Give me money, give me money. Li Yundong stared blankly and thought to himself, she won't use the money I gave her to play cards, will she? Didn't she say that they had no money? While he was thinking, he heard the other disciples crying and shouting, 6 Shibua, aren't you being too cruel? Where do we get the money to give you? Chao Yi stood up, waved the money in her hand, and said, well, the sect leader is kind and has specially given us money. Take it and use it first. These female disciples were immediately overjoyed. They rushed forward and distributed all the money. Then, they cupped their hands and thanked Li Yundong from afar. Li Yundong was already dumbfounded. Seeing them salute him and thank him, he had no choice but to force a smile and return the salute with a dry smile. Seeing him like this, Su Chan, who was standing to one side, wanted to laugh but didn't dare. She lowered her head, but her shoulders kept shaking. Li Yundong had been completely defeated by the guys of the Fox Zen school. He pretended to be angry and glared at Su Chan. Laugh your ass. So this is your Fox Zen school? What kind of people are they? Each one is more unreliable than the other. Su Chan giggled and said, it's useless for you to criticize me. I left the sect when I was very young. After returning to the Fox Zen school, I didn't go out at all. How would I know what the Shirbas and Shirbas are like? Li Yundong rubbed his temples and turned to walk toward the backyard of the Taoist temple. But after walking for a while, he heard Chao Yi laugh again. Nonsense, it's all the same kind of self-groping. Give me money. The disciples of the other 3 families complained, 6 Shibua, you're cheating. Why is it all the same kind of big 3 yuan and all the same kind of self-groping? That's right. Besides, how can I give you money for this whole note? Are you an idiot? Can't you use scissors to cut it up and give it to me bit by bit? Hey, 3rd Shiji is really smart. Good idea. Li Yundong almost staggered. He turned around abruptly, his face full of rage. He wanted to shout, "Smart my ass. That's money. Do you think it's paper chips?" As soon as his words reached his throat, he heard Chao Yi yell, "You are all idiots. Can money be cut? Can it still be used if it's cut? Can't you use the branch as a bargaining chip? We'll settle the score after the fight." The other disciples immediately smiled and praised, "Six Shibwa is really smart. Good idea, good idea." Li Yundong swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. He wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and looked at the smart disciples of the Fox Zen school speechlessly. He shook his head and turned to continue walking inside. But after a few steps, he heard the female disciple who had said that she would cut the banknotes say loudly, "Ha ha ha, Tianhu. Sixth martial uncle, no matter how great your great three primordial purity is, it can't compare to my heavenly beard. Give me money." The other three all cursed, "Tianhu? I'm a nine-tailed celestial fox. Do you think you're a mystical silver fox? B** starred, you actually lost everything. We have no money. What should we do? Hey, by the way, the leader has money. Let's borrow it from him." Yes, yes, where is the leader? Where is the leader? Hey, where is the leader? Hey, leader, please wait. I have something to discuss with you. When Li Yundong heard these words, he didn't dare to stay any longer. He immediately walked faster and faster, as if he was avoiding ghosts, and quickly escaped. He took a few turns and got rid of these guys. Then he held his head with both hands and screamed, "Oh my God, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? These people are too stupid, aren't they?" At this time, Su Chan couldn't help laughing out loud, //7854627895541. Chapter 284. Go to watch net. Li Yundong glared at Su Chan. "Laugh? How dare you laugh?" Su Chan immediately covered her mouth, but her eyes were still smiling like crescent moons. From time to time, she would make a snorting sound. Watch net. 7 Li Yundong was so angry that he laughed. "I used to think that you were the most unreliable fox spirit in the world. I didn't expect that the fox spirits of the Fox Zen school were even more unreliable than you. Is this a fine tradition of the Fox Zen school?" Su Chan wrapped her hands around his arm and said with a smile, "Who told you to be the leader of our Fox Zen school now? Besides, my master said that most of my Shibwa and the others have never left the Fox Zen school, so they are a little strange. Please forgive them." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "They are more than a little strange. It's simply bizarre." He sighed and shook his head. "Forget it. Do you know where the former sect leader's room is?" Su Chan smiled and said, "Of course I know." After that, she took Li Yundong's hand through a corridor, turned a corner, and pointed to an unlocked room. "This is it." Li Yundong pushed the door open and walked in. Although the furnishings in the room were simple, the decoration was full of classical charm. There were rockery and strange stones on the pot rack in the corner, which looked very elegant. Li Yundong walked through the front hall and into the study at the back. He saw a desk with ink, paper, and inkstone on it. Next to it was a bamboo bookshelf with some thread-bound books. He walked up to it and rummaged through it. Sure enough, he found a small purple gold wooden box in the bookshelf. The box was about 8 inches long, 5 inches wide, and 5 inches high. There was a small copper lock hanging on the box. Li Yundong stretched out his fingers to pull it open, only to find that a row of runes suddenly lit up on the copper lock. "Don't pull it too hard," Su Chan said. "There's a rune array on it." Li Yundong put down the wooden box in his hand, looked around, and said, "There should be a key there. Let's find it." Su Chan helped him search for a while and found a copper key the size of a pinky finger in a book on the bookshelf. She smiled happily and said, I found it. Take a look and see if this works. Li Yundong took the key and said with a smile, it's so complicated. It seems that there are treasures inside. Su Chan nodded curiously. Yeah. Li Yundong opened the copper lock with a click, took a deep breath, and opened the small wooden box. He took a closer look and saw that there was an ID card at the top of the small wooden box. Below the ID card were several bankbooks, and below the bankbooks was a stack of white paper. Li Yunyang smiled bitterly and said, your former leader is dead. What's the use of keeping the passbook? Unless there's a password on it, we can't withdraw the money. As he spoke, he took out his ID card and bankbook, put the ID card aside, and opened the last page of the bankbook. He took a closer look and immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. The balance on the bankbook was 328 yuan. No way. Li Yundong's eyes widened. This is an empty passbook. He quickly opened the other two bankbooks and flipped to the last page with words. Without exception, there was a balance of 1 or 2 yuan. Li Yundong felt a chill run down his spine. No way. He didn't leave a single cent. What the hell? Su Chan couldn't laugh anymore. She quickly said, look at what's written on the paper below. Li Yundong opened it and saw that it was a lease contract for the Taoist Temple of the Fox Zen School. Li Yundong looked at the rental price and was immediately shocked. 35 million yuan for 5 years. Then he looked at the expiration date and was shocked again. It was next month. Good heavens, misfortune never comes alone, and blessings never come in pairs. Li Yundong took the contract and tilted his head to look at Su Chan. Why do I feel like I've boarded a pirate ship? Su Chan said angrily, don't say that about our Fox Zen school. It's not easy for Grandmaster to run this sect alone. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, well, now it's my turn to take over. Where can I get more than 5 million yuan? Su Chan also said worriedly, yes, if it were 10 or 20,000 yuan, it would be fine. But what about more than 5 million yuan? She thought about it with a sad face. Suddenly, she jumped up and said, why don't we go to Sherbua and the others to discuss it? Li Yundong shook his head like a rattle. Forget it. I guess your former leader used a paternalistic management method. He didn't let them interfere in anything and took care of everything by himself. As a result, they seem to be very powerful, but in fact, they are just like you. They have never seen the world and don't understand the ways of the world. At first, I thought Chao Yi was better, but now it seems that. Su Chan jumped up and said coquettishly, don't say that. Li Yundong laughed and spread his hands. Okay, I won't say it. But how can we solve this problem? Our Fox Zen school will soon be sleeping on the street. Su Chan rolled her eyes and said, then let them live in our house? Li Yundong immediately shook his head and glared at Su Chan, are you crazy? Do you think it's 2 or 3 people? If more than a dozen people live here, how can they live? Who will sleep on the floor or me? Su Chan pouted and sat on the chair. This won't work, that won't work. Then what should we do? Li Yundong also pulled over a mahogany chair and sat down next to Su Chan with a sigh. Yes, what should we do? What you said before was right. If you haven't heard the Tao, it's difficult to learn the Dharma. If you've heard the Tao, it's difficult to get money. How am I supposed to get money in one day? I can't take such a group of vixens and live on the street, can I? Hey, do you think that when we quarreled with the boy who pursued you, I said that I would live on the street and it immediately came true? Karma shouldn't have come so fast, right? Su Chan smiled and spat. Bah, don't talk nonsense. You are my hero. How can you live on the street? You must have a way. Li Yundong sighed and frowned. He was thinking hard about a way. Suddenly, he had an idea. He slapped his thigh and laughed. I have a way. Su Chan touched her thigh and said loudly, if you have a way, why did you slap my thigh? Li Yundong quickly rubbed it for her and said with a smile, I was too excited. I accidentally hurt myself. Su Chan pouted, but she was curious about what Li Yundong had thought of, so she asked, what did you think of just now? Li Yundong smiled and said, when I went up the mountain from the Fox Zen school, I went through the back door of the Fox Zen school. I saw a lot of antiques, calligraphy and paintings in the secret room. Although, I broke some of them, I think there should be some intact ones in there that can be sold for money. Go to Kanban. 7 KOM. Go to Kanban. 7 KOM. Color. Paper. Learn, net. Super_speed. More. If I sell any one of them, I will be a millionaire. Su Chan was very simple. Seeing that Li Yundong had come up with this idea of robbing the east wall to pay the west wall, she didn't think there was anything wrong with it. The little girl only felt that it was good that her master could solve this problem. As for what she sold, it was the son selling the father's field. Anyway, it was not her savings, so she didn't feel bad about it. Su Chan beamed and said, where is it? Where is it? Take me to see it. I've never been there before. Li Yundong thought of a solution and suddenly felt more confident. He laughed, waved his hand, and said, well, I'll take you to see it. The two of them went out of the room, talking and laughing all the way, but there was no more gloom. Li Yundong couldn't help but sigh in his heart, the ancients are right. It's hard to be a hero without a penny. No matter how good he is at fighting and how powerful his Shintong is, so what? Without money, it's all in vain. Li Yundong and Su Chan came to the back door of the Taoist temple. Then, he held the little girl's hand, ran his qi, and flew up. Su Chan was surprised and happy. She said, Yundong, you can fly now? I remember when you couldn't fly and needed my help. Li Yundong laughed and said, if I can't even fly, how can I drive away the enemies of the Fox Zen school? As he said this, he smiled at Su Chan and said, you used to take me flying. Now it's my turn to take you flying. Su Chan smiled sweetly and looked at Li Yundong. The two of them felt as if they had drunk honey, and a strong sweetness seeped into their hearts. The two of them flew along the hillside to the hidden entrance of the cave. As soon as Li Yundong pushed aside the grass and leaves covering the entrance of the cave, he saw a group of black shadows flying out. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat and he immediately pulled Su Chan far away. When the two of them flew away, he found that a flock of birds had flown out of the cave, and then a group of monkeys ran out with a squeak. Li Yundong laughed and said, it turns out that there is a group of guests inside. I thought there were enemies. Su Chan's eyes were sharp. She found that the monkeys seemed to be holding something in their hands. She said, these monkeys seem to be holding something. Li Yundong didn't pay attention to it and said with a smile, maybe it's fruit? The two of them flew back to the entrance of the cave and walked along the corridor. After walking for a while, Li Yundong came to the big stone room where he had practiced the heavenly Jin Dan technique. Su Chan saw Lin Yofa, who had been dead for a long time, at a glance. She cried out and couldn't help sighing, alas, he was the leader of a sect. I didn't expect that he would die without a burial place. Yundong, find a place to bury him, okay? Li Yundong sighed and said, you're kind. He hurt you, but you're speaking up for him. Su Chan took Li Yundong's arm and said, death is the most important thing. Let's let bygones be bygones. Look, aren't we all right now? Li Yundong nodded and said, well, you're right. We'll find a place to bury him later, so that he can rest in peace. After that, he took Su Chan's hand, pointed to the words on the wall, and said with a smile, look at what's on it. Before, Li Yundong had never told Su Chan that he had seen the heavenly Jin Dan technique carved by the mystical silver fox here. The purpose was to give the little girl a surprise. Sure enough, from the beginning, Su Chan's whole body shook, and her eyes widened. When she saw the last part, she was so shocked that her face turned red, her sinuses closed, and she gasped for breath. She screamed, grabbed Li Yundong's hand tightly with both hands, and kept shouting, "Yundong, Yundong." This was left by the mystical silver fox. Oh my God, it turns out that this is the reason why our Fox Zen school hasn't moved away for thousands of years. Su Chan's eyes were shining as she looked at every word on the wall. Her face was full of excitement and yearning. After looking back and forth several times, her emotions slowly calmed down. She said with longing, "If only I could be like the mystical silver fox." Li Yundong gently stroked her hair and said softly, "That day will come." Su Chan nodded hard and said, "Well, you've become so strong. I want to become stronger too." Li Yundong pointed at the tip of the little girl's nose with his finger and said with a smile, "Okay, I'll urge you." Su Chan giggled and said, "I want you to teach me cultivation in the future. I used to teach you, and you'll teach me in the future." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Okay, but you can't be lazy." The two of them talked and laughed as they walked inside. Along the way, mice ran out from time to time in the tunnel. Li Yundong felt a little strange. It's strange. There were no mice in there last time. Su Chan said, "It must be because you didn't close the door of the stone cave, so monkeys, birds, and mice all ran in." Li Yundong said with a smile, "That must be it." But before he could finish his words, his face suddenly changed dramatically. He pulled Su Chan and ran inside crazily. Su Chan shouted in confusion, "What's wrong? What happened?" Li Yundong didn't say anything. When he pulled Su Chan down to the next floor of the stone cave, he suddenly stayed at the door of the stone room as if he had been hit by the body-fixing spell. The stone room was full of mice, and these mice were frantically gnawing at everything that had fallen to the ground. Li Yundong took a deep breath and covered Su Chan's ears. Then, with a fierce roar, he killed all the mice in the stone room in an instant. Li Yundong watched as the mice fell to the side without making a sound. The corner of his eyes twitched and he said to Su Chan, "Hurry up and see if there's anything intact." Su Chan was also dumbfounded at this time. She quickly squatted down and rummaged through the mouse corpses all over the ground. The two of them searched back and forth in the stone room several times. When they stood up and looked at each other, Li Yundong stared at Su Chan with his eyes wide open. Su Chan also stared at Li Yundong with her eyes wide open. The two of them shook their heads at the same time. Li Yundong suddenly let out a long sigh and wailed, "Oh my God, I've really become a loser. There's not even a single intact antique calligraphy or painting. Isn't this too tragic? //7854627895541 Chapter 285. Go to watch net. Looking at the mess in the stone room, Li Yundong felt like he was going crazy. Su Chan couldn't help but sigh and say, "What should we do?" Li Yundong let out a long sigh and said, "It's all my fault for not closing the door. What a tragedy." As he spoke, he casually picked up a painting. It was Wu Daozi's Heavenly King sending his child painting that he had seen before. The head of the character on the painting had been bitten by a mouse, and there was a hole in it. It was truly a tragic sight. Watch net. Kai 98 When 1/0 net 6 he smiled bitterly and said, "The historians and collectors of China will kill me." Wu Daozi's famous painting was destroyed just like that. Su Chan said cautiously, "Maybe it's fake." Li Yundong turned his head and smiled bitterly at her. "You really know how to comfort people." Alas, don't say it. This place was probably the meticulous collection of the previous leaders of the Fox Zen school. But now, less than 2 days after I became the leader of the Fox Zen school, these treasures have been completely destroyed by me. I think I can be honored as the most prodigal leader in the history of Fox Zen School. Su Chan had left the Fox Zen School when she was a child. Although her sense of belonging to the sect was strong, it was not as strong as her feelings for Li Yundong. She smiled awkwardly for a while and said, "Why don't we leave here first?" Li Yundong also looked at the broken antiques and paintings on the ground, which were very eye-catching and annoying. He shook his head and said, "Let's go. I'll think of another way. There's really no such thing as getting rich overnight in this world." He walked to the door of the stone room, looked back, and said, "Alas, if the other people of the Fox Zen School find out, I'll have to step down immediately, won't I?" Su Chan immediately said loudly, "No, you saved our Fox Zen School. Shibwa and the others won't do that." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "You silly girl, what kind of society are we in now? Come on, in this economic society, you have to be rich to be the boss. No matter how good you are at fighting, if you can't even feed your underlings, who would want to work for you? It's already very difficult for me to raise a little girl like you, let alone such a large group of people." With that, Li Yundong pinched the little girl's nose with a smile. Su Chan screamed and jumped away. Her eyes were rolling in her eye sockets, as if she was thinking about something. Li Yundong smiled and turned to walk out of the cave, saying, "What are you thinking about? Let's go." Su Chan suddenly had an idea. She pinched her fingers and ignited a ball of fire in her palm. She threw it into the stone room with a bang. The stone room was originally made of wooden shelves and paper paintings. As soon as it came into contact with the fire, it immediately burst into flames. Hearing the sound, Li Yundong turned around in surprise, only to see the little girl standing at the door of the stone room, clapping her hands proudly and laughing as if she had done something amazing. "Watch net." Li Yundong stared blankly at the raging fire in the stone room and stammered, "What are you doing?" Su Chan turned around with a proud look on her face. "They won't know if I burn them all. This is called destroying the evidence." Li Yundong sucked in a breath of cold air. "Are you even crazier than me? Don't you know that some calligraphy and paintings can be repaired, and some parts of antiques can also be repaired? There's no way to save them at all." Su Chan's smile froze on her face. She quickly lowered her head, looked up at Li Yundong timidly, and then quickly lowered her eyes again. She twisted the corner of her clothes with her fingers and said weakly, "Did I do something wrong again?" The expression on Li Yundong's face was very interesting. He didn't know whether he should cry or laugh. After a long time, he swallowed hard and said in a hoarse voice, "Just now, the most tragic catastrophe in the history of the Chinese antique industry happened. And I am the main culprit, and you are the accomplice. No, I just didn't close the door, but you set it on fire. You are the main culprit, and I am the accomplice." The more Li Yundong spoke, the more righteous he became. The more Su Chan listened, the lower her head was. Tears were about to fall, and she muttered in a weak voice, "I also want to help you." Seeing the girl like this, Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He held the girl in his arms, pinched the flesh next to her cheek, and said with a smile, okay, I am the main culprit, and you are the accomplice, okay?" Su Chan smiled through her tears and raised her head. "Sir, you are the best to me." Li Yundong put on a serious face and said deliberately, "Don't think that you can escape the punishment of law and morality just because you are an accomplice. If you behave like this today, you will definitely be nailed to the pillar of shame in the history of Chinese antiques." Li Yundong's harsh words made the girl stare blankly. After a long time, she asked weakly, "I will be nailed to the pillar of shame because I am an accomplice. What will you do if you are the main culprit?" Li Yundong said seriously, "I will be nailed to the pillar of shame." Su Chan laughed out loud, hugged Li Yundong, and said in a sweet voice, "No matter where I am, as long as I am with Yundong." Li Yundong laughed and shook his head helplessly. "I really lost to you. In the future, please be more careful when you do things." Su Chan pouted and said, Didn't you cause this situation because you didn't close the door? Li Yundong glared at her and said guiltily, don't say that. If others find out what we did tonight, they will be arrested and sentenced to 700 or 800 years in prison. Su Chan rolled her eyes and giggled. It doesn't matter. There is no evidence now. Li Yundong coughed and asked seriously, where were you tonight? Su Chan smiled and said, with my master. Li Yundong asked seriously again, then where is your master? Su Chan said cleverly, I was looking for something in the leader's study. Li Yundong nodded with satisfaction. Well. You are worth teaching. Let's go. Remember, tonight, we didn't see anything, we didn't hear anything, so we don't know anything. Su Chan hurriedly nodded her head like a chicken pecking at grains. After the two heinous criminals burned the evidence, they repeatedly compared their confessions, then looked at each other with a tacit understanding. They chuckled and walked along the tunnel out of the cave. Go to see net. Kai 98 when 1 Shui 0 net 6. As soon as he walked out of the cave, Li Yundong found that the sky was already a little bright. He flew down the mountain with Su Chan and returned to the Taoist temple. The two of them walked to the leader's study like thieves. As soon as they arrived at the door, they saw Chao Yi coming up to them. At this time, Chao Yi had already taken off her costume and was wearing a Taoist robe. When she saw Li Yundong, she went up to him. The first thing she said scared Li Yundong a lot. Leader, you are here? We looked for you all night last night, but we don't know where you went. We were so worried. When Li Yundong heard this, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He thought to himself, no way. We just compared our confessions, and now we don't need to use them? Did we work for nothing? Li Yundong forced himself to calm down. He asked with a glimmer of hope, have you been waiting here for a long time? Chao Yi smiled and said, not long. Li Yundong breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. Chao Yi immediately smiled and said, about half a night. Half a night. Is this not long? Li Yundong's forehead was full of sweat. He wanted to laugh, but the corners of his mouth twitched and he couldn't. Seeing Li Yundong's strange expression, Chao Yi asked, Leader, where did you go last night? Li Yundong forced a smile. His mind was racing, but he couldn't find a good excuse to dodge the question. Fortunately, Su Chan reacted quickly. She said shyly, 6 Shibwa, don't ask. At first, Chao Yi looked at Su Chan with some confusion, and then looked at Li Yundong. She suddenly understood. Hey, what can two devoted lovers do in private for one night? Chao Yi smiled ambiguously and said, oh. I see. Li Yundong also laughed dryly with her for a while. The corners of his mouth moved, but he didn't smile. The three of them laughed at each other for a while. Li Yundong quickly changed the topic and said, what do you want from me? Chao Yi sighed and said, thousands of words, but in the end, it all comes down to one word. Money. When the people we invited saw that we weren't going to sing, they shouted that they wanted to leave. Before the performance was finished, they wanted to charge us for the whole performance and the rental of various materials. Li Yundong couldn't help asking, didn't I give you money? Are you using it to play mahjong? Chao Yi smiled bitterly and said, Leader, it's just entertainment. Do you really want to spend the money on your own? Besides, we inner disciples don't go down the mountain all day long. What's the use of money? It's nothing more than a flower. However, the money you gave us is not enough. Li Yundong asked, how much do you need? After saying this, his heart was beating like a drum. If it was an astronomical number, then he, the leader of the Fox Zen School who had just ascended to the position of leader of the Fox Zen School, would be disgraced. While he was feeling uneasy, Chao Yi gestured a number and said, 38 yuan. Li Yundong almost fainted. He cried out involuntarily, don't you have 38 yuan? Qiao Yi shook her head like a rattle. No, the leader of the Fox Zen School is responsible for our food, clothing, and accommodation. We don't need to take a penny. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, these guys are really stingy. They want 38 yuan. Qiao Yi also smiled bitterly and said, they also said that your Taoist temple occupies such a large mountain, but you are not willing to give them 38 yuan. Who would believe that you can't afford it? How stingy. Li Yundong was completely speechless. He pressed his forehead with one hand and thought to himself, what a tragedy. I'm probably the poorest leader in all of history, right? Li Yundong touched his pocket and found that he was also penniless. He only had a credit card that he always carried with him. He sighed and said, where is there an ATM nearby? I'll go and get some money. Qiao Yi said, there is a hotel near the foot of the mountain. Do you need me to go with you, leader? When Li Yundong heard the word leader at this time, he felt that it was very harsh. He waved his hand and said, no, I know where it is. Su Chan can accompany me. As he said this, he quickly pulled Su Chan out of the Taoist temple. Qiao Yi looked at their backs from behind and muttered to herself, one of them still looks like a virgin, while the other is still full of vitality. They don't look like they had sex last night. Ah, by the way, do they like other things? While Qiao Yi was thinking about it, Li Yundong had already left the Taoist temple with Su Chan. After they went down the mountain, they withdrew money from the UnionPay ATM set up in the hotel at the foot of the mountain, and then returned to the Taoist temple to pay. When the money was paid, the cashier looked at Li Yundong and said disdainfully, seeing that you have such a big business at such a young age, I thought you were very powerful. I didn't expect that you would even be stingy with 38 yuan for a small business like ours. You are really stingy. Humph. After that, he walked away. Li Yundong's face darkened, but Su Chan looked at him and whispered, Yundong, don't pay attention to this kind of person. You will definitely be very rich in the future. You didn't know anything about cultivation before, but now you are already a famous cultivator in the cultivation world. I believe that even if you want to make money, you will have a very good way. Li Yundong felt much better. He thought for a moment and said, I do have a way to make money, but I lack the starting capital, and I can't do it alone. I have to go back and discuss it with Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan and ask them for help. Moreover, the lease of the Taoist temple of the Fox Zen School is about to expire. I have to get the money as soon as possible. As he said this, he took Su Chan to Qiao Yi and told her his plan, the place where he would go to school in Tiannan City, and his address. He also told her his phone number and finally left 10,000 yuan. The former leader didn't leave any money. Our Fox Zen School can't go on like this, or we will starve to death. Take this money and use it first. I'll find a way to get some money. During the days I'm away, take care of the Fox Zen School for me. If anything happens, call me. If you encounter an enemy, fight if you can, and run if you can't. It doesn't matter if we lose the Taoist temple of the Fox Zen School. What matters is the people. Even if we lose it, we can take it back. Qiao Yi opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but she saw Li Yundong leave in a hurry with Su Chan. In the end, she didn't say anything. // 785462789541. Chapter 286. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong led Su Chan back to Tiannan City. As soon as they entered the house, Su Chan let out a cheer and looked around happily. She touched here and there, greedily inhaling the air in the house. It's so good to be home again. It's so comfortable at home. Li Yundong chuckled and looked around. He didn't find Zi Yuan and Wan Hongling at home. He thought to himself, could it be that these two girls are in my own house? After wandering around the living room for a while, she seemed to think of something. Then, she went into Li Yundong's room. After a while, she came out with her hands behind her back and said mysteriously, "Guess what I have in my hand?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "What else can it be?" "Of course it's your Hello Kitty piggy bank." Su Chan pouted and took out the piggy bank behind her. "I really can't hide anything from you. It's so boring." But she soon smiled again and said, "I'll smash it and take out the money in it for you to use, okay?" Li Yundong gently stroked the little girl's hair and said with a smile, "This is your private money. Keep it. I still have money to use, so I don't need it." Su Chan nodded, looked at the piggy bank in her hand eagerly, and said, "Then I'll save more money for you." Li Yundong laughed and held the little girl in his arms lovingly. "Didn't I give you that money?" "Silly girl." Su Chan giggled. She put her arms around Li Yundong's waist and pressed her face against his chest. She sniffed his breath and said, "Yundong, I'm so happy." Li Yundong smiled, stroked her hair, and said, "We will get better and better in the future, right?" Su Chan raised her head, her face full of happiness and joy. "Yes." But not long after, she suddenly thought of something and said with a sad face, "Yundong, I miss my master. I wonder how she is." Li Yundong's face froze and he said in a deep voice, "As a senior of the Jingyi school's Linggong sect, Yan Fong has been lurking in the Fox Zen school for 9 years without being discovered. It can be seen how good her endurance is. I used to think that she would return to the Linggong sect as soon as possible, but now that I think about it, I don't think it's possible. Based on her behavior and character, she would rather betray the world than let the world betray her. Such a person is the most cunning and suspicious. She won't trust anyone, so I guess she must have a way out, and it's very likely that she hasn't returned to the Linggong sect." Speaking of this, Li Yundong also sighed and said, "If Yan Fong hides herself, it will be difficult. I don't know where to find her." Su Chan said with a worried face, "But what if she wants to go back to Linggong sect?" Li Yundong thought for a moment, then let go of Su Chan and said, "I'll go look for Zi Yuan." As he spoke, he walked to the balcony and looked around. Seeing that no one was paying attention, he quickly jumped to the balcony where Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling lived. He probed around and saw that there was no one in the room, so he jumped back and shook his head at Su Chan, "No one's here." Su Chan looked disappointed, but she also knew that this matter could not be rushed. Instead, she comforted Li Yundong and said, "It's okay. Take your time." Seeing that the little girl was so sensible, Li Yundong also comforted her. Given the grudge between Yan Fong and Ao Wushuang, I don't think Yan Fong will let Ao Wushuang die so easily. Moreover, your master has only been sealed. Yan Fong is now a yang spirit body. She must find another body to possess as soon as possible. Otherwise, when the yang spirit becomes the yin spirit will run out of spiritual qi and she will not be able to find a body to possess. Then her soul will really be destroyed and she will disappear. Su Chan nodded and hugged Li Yundong tightly. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were full of worry. Li Yundong patted her back lovingly, but he couldn't help thinking, where are Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling at this time? Could it be that they have returned to the Linggong sect? Just as Li Yundong was thinking about this, in the Linggong sect of Mount Longhu, Ruan Hongling, who had just woken up from her meditation, opened her eyes. Ruan Hongling had followed Zi Yuan to the Fox Zen school and witnessed an unprecedentedly fierce battle. Although most of the cultivators were experts of the younger generation, their level of fighting was extremely high, which had benefited her a lot. She followed Zi Yuan back to the sect and began to meditate. When she opened her eyes again, it was already the next day. When she woke up in her room, the first thing she did was to go to the cave residence of the Linggong sect to see if Zi Yuan, who was in seclusion, had come out. She went to see the net. 7 K.O.M. Zi Yuan had been beaten by Li Yundong so hard that the corners of her mouth were bleeding, and her internal organs had been injured. Therefore, when she returned to the mansion, she immediately chose to go into seclusion. Ruan Hongling walked around the cave and saw that the entrance of a cave covered by a huge rock was tightly closed. She sighed faintly and thought to herself, Sister Zi Yuan, you have really sacrificed too much for this Jindan successor. The 3 great treasures of our Linggong sect have been destroyed, and you have been injured by him. But is it worth it for you to pay so much? Ruan Hongling's gaze fell on the spirit water pond. She saw that the 2 flower buds of the twin breeders, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, were slowly growing. The 2 flowers were about to bloom, emitting a faint fluorescent light. She could vaguely see 2 tiny human figures shrinking into a ball. Ruan Hongling couldn't help smiling. Just as she was about to reach out and touch them, she heard a sudden sound of something breaking through the air outside. A woman shouted, Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling of the Linggong sect, come out quickly. Ruan Hongling frowned and immediately walked out quickly. As soon as she walked out, she saw Zhou Ping, who had had a conflict with her before, standing in front of the mansion with a sneer. Next to her was a Taoist nun in a Taoist robe. This Taoist nun was plain-looking and had nothing in her hands. There was neither a horsetail whisk nor a sword in her hand like the others. She was just holding her sleeves, her eyelids drooping, as if she was looking down at the tip of her nose obediently. Nothing around her could attract her attention. Ruan Hongling took a closer look at her and saw a round red dot the size of a pencil between her eyebrows, which looked like a red mole. Ruan Hongling suddenly felt a chill in her heart. This was the Lingsha mole that only the direct bloodline of the head of the Zhini school had the qualification point. Sure enough, when Zhou Ping saw Ruan Hongling coming out, she shouted, How dare you? You've seen the Lady of the Earthly Fire of the Zhini school and you still haven't bowed down. Ruan Hongling was shocked. The Lady of the Earthly Fire? Could it be the Lady of the Earthly Fire, who was both the elder sister of the leader of the Zhini school and the eldest sister of the leader of the Zhini school? Ruan Hongling was looking at Zhang Ling and feeling incredulous in her heart. As a disciple of the Linggong sect of the Zhini school, she had naturally heard of the deeds of the seniors. In the past, Zi Yuan had commented on the famous cultivators in the world, and the Lady of the Earthly Fire was among them. She remembered that Zi Yuan had once said, the Lady of the Earthly Fire's control of fire can be said to be unparalleled in the world. She can draw out the Samadhi true fire from the 9th earth and burn everything in the world. She had originally thought that a cultivator who could cultivate fire to such a level would be arrogant and surly, or at least a person like fierce Zhang Fei. But today, it turned out to be an ordinary Taoist nun, who didn't seem to be much older than her. Zhou Ping saw that Ruan Hongling was just staring at Zhang Ling without speaking or bowing. She suddenly became furious and said, How rude. Are all the people of the Linggong sect so rude? Ruan Hongling withdrew her gaze and glanced at her, but she still didn't salute. Instead, she said, My sister Zi Yuan is now like the leader of the Linggong sect. Even when she sees the leader of the Zhini school, she has to salute him. I am also her shimi. In terms of status, I am equal to the Lady of the Earthly Fire. Why should I salute her? Zhou Ping was so angry that smoke was coming out of her 7 orifices. B****, even if the leader sees the Lady of the Earthly Fire, he has to respectfully call her Shiji. Who do you think you are? How dare you be so rude? Ruan Hongling was born with a fiery temper. Except for Li Yundong, she had never been afraid of anyone else. She sneered and said, when the leader of the Earthly Fire sees the Lady of the Earthly Fire, he calls her Shiji. This is an internal relationship, but when my Shiji, the Lady of the Earthly Fire, sees him, she has to salute him. This is an external relationship. Haven't you heard of the saying that there is a difference between the inside and the outside? Zhou Ping was furious. How dare you be so presumptuous? Do you still have our Zhini school in your eyes? A small branch of the Zhini school dares to be so arrogant. Fortunately, you have been in decline all these years. Otherwise, if you were allowed to be arrogant, wouldn't you be riding on the neck of the Zhini school and peeing on it? Ruan Hongling also said angrily, you also know that our Linggong sect is a branch of the Zheni school? Logically speaking, our Linggong sect is also a child of the Zheni school. It's fine if you don't raise us, but over the years, you have seized the opportunity to suppress us. When have you ever regarded us as a branch? As the saying goes, if you treat me as a scholar of the country, I will repay you as a scholar of the country. If you treat me as a bandit, I will repay you as a bandit. You have done the first thing, but now you are blaming me for doing the second thing. Don't you think it's ridiculous? What's more, I haven't done the second thing. I'm just acting according to the law. Zhou Ping was so angry that her whole body was trembling. She pointed at Wan Hongling and was speechless. You. She was Zhang Tianhe's Shiji and had been secretly in love with Zhang Tianhe for a long time. This time, she had accompanied him down the mountain. She had thought that it would be a good job, but she hadn't expected that Zhang Tianhe would go to the Linggong sect to visit her because he admired Zi Yuan's beauty and reputation. This had already made her very unhappy. But what she hadn't expected was that Zhang Tianhe would lose to Li Jiandong in the subsequent battle, and that Li Jiandong had an affair with that little B***tch. After Zhou Ping returned to Mount Longhu, the more she thought about it, the more unwilling she became. However, the leader of the Zheni school was in seclusion, so she didn't dare to disturb him. She told Zhang Ling the whole thing with some embellishments. As Zhang Tianhe's aunt, Zhang Ling had doted on him since he was a child. When she heard this, she was immediately furious. What? The little B***tch of the Linggong sect colluded with outsiders to bully the future leader of our Zheni school. How could this be? How could this be? After hearing this, Zhang Ling immediately brought Zhou Ping to denounce her, but she was also worried that she had made a mistake, so she let Zhou Ping speak up while she observed silently from the side. At this point, Zhang Ling had no choice but to speak. She raised her eyelids, and her eyes shone brightly. She snorted coldly and said, "Little girl, you're young, but you talk big. Do you think that our Zheni school is a criminal enemy?" Wan Hongling snorted coldly. "I wouldn't dare. If the Zheni school regards us as national warriors, we will naturally repay them as national warriors. If they regard us as a criminal enemy." Humph. Zhang Ling suddenly burst into laughter, which made Wan Hongling's heart beat violently. Her eardrums felt as if they were being burned by a raging fire, and she felt a burst of heat and pain. Zhang Ling sneered and said, "What a big tone. I think your Linggong sect really has no successors and has no good discipline. Today, I will discipline you on behalf of your leader." Wan Hongling's heart trembled. Just as she was about to step back, she suddenly heard a soft voice say, "The Lady of the Earthly Fire has come. May I know what's the matter?" As soon as this voice sounded, the tense atmosphere on the field suddenly calmed down a lot. If Zhang Ling's voice was like a raging fire, extremely fierce, aggressive, and making people panic, then this voice was like a clear spring, gentle and calm, making people feel relaxed and happy. For a moment, everyone turned their heads to look at the source of the voice, only to see a beautiful woman in a purple robe walking out of the cave of the Linggong sect. Every step she took gave people the feeling that she was treading on the waves. She was ethereal, like a fairy from the ninth heaven who had descended to the mortal world. This woman was none other than Zi Yuan, the eldest Shiji of the Linggong sect of the Zheni school. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.